Chapter 301, The Celebration and SPEW. The celebration proceeded without a hitch. Ethan had expressed his fondness for the Chinese cuisine prepared by Zhang Chu, who, motivated by the compliment, dedicated himself to mastering the culinary arts. He frequently visited the Hogwarts kitchen, seeking guidance from the house elves, and his skills improved remarkably, even surpassing those of seasoned chefs. After the festivities, Hermione halted those who were about to leave, revealing she had something else to discuss. She produced an ornate little iron box, from which she drew a stack of parchment and approximately 50 badges of various colors, each inscribed with the letters SPEW. Luna, examining a badge, inquired, "What does this mean?" "It's not vomiting. It stands for the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare," Hermione clarified. Astoria, puzzled, remarked, "I've never heard of such an organization." "That's because I've just established it," Hermione responded with a crisp tone. Zhang Chu, surprised, asked, "How many members do you have?" "Well, if you join, that would make 6, Hermione said, pushing the parchment towards them. Ethan, intrigued, picked up a document and read through it. Hermione continued, her voice growing more passionate. "My immediate goal is to ensure house elves receive fair wages and a decent working environment. In the long run, I aim to change the laws preventing elves from using wands, and to advocate for an elf's inclusion in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. It's disgraceful how their interests are currently overlooked." "And what's our first step?" Ethan asked, patiently awaiting her plan. "We need to recruit members. I suggest a membership fee of 2 silver sickles for a badge. The funds will help us print leaflets," Hermione explained, her enthusiasm evident. Ethan noted Hermione's use of "we," implying she already considered them members. She looked at them expectantly, but the response was tepid, except for Ethan. "I don't fancy walking around with a badge that implies vomit," Zhang Chu objected. "It's ridiculous." "It's SPW," Hermione retorted, frustrated. "I wanted to name it the Campaign to Ban Cruelty to Our Magical Creature Friends and improve their legal status, but it was too long, so I abbreviated it." "Why should we wear a badge and engage in these activities?" Zhang Chu grumbled, feeling the issue was irrelevant to them. Hermione, her indignation palpable, argued, "This is not trivial. It's our mission. The way wizards treat house elves is abhorrent. They're worse than slaves, receiving no breaks, no sick leave, no compensation, nothing." Astoria felt uneasy, aware her family was among those Hermione criticized for their treatment of house elves. She glanced at Ethan, worried he might judge her. Ginny squeezed Astoria's hand reassuringly. "Don't fret. Hermione isn't blaming you. She's been planning SPW for weeks, motivated by the dire conditions of the house elves at Hogwarts, not by your family's practices." Hermione's speech echoed Ginny's reassurance. "It's appalling that Hogwarts, an educational institution, employs over 100 house elves who remain unseen and unacknowledged by many until they graduate. The food we eat, the cleanliness we enjoy, all result from their unseen labor. Hogwarts should be a place of learning, not just academically, but morally, teaching us to recognize and rectify injustices within our society." Hermione's tone shifted from disappointment to excitement as she spoke about the need for change in the wizarding world, particularly regarding the treatment of house elves. Wizards must change their behavior. They can no longer treat these magical creatures cruelly. "We urgently need to improve the legal status of house elves," she declared, waving a badge in her hand, her voice imbued with a sense of mission. "I've been researching their history in the library recently. The slave status of house elves has persisted for centuries. It's unbelievable that no one has stood up for them." Her face radiated passionate enthusiasm. "Since no one else has taken action, we will. We will change the status of house elves. We will help them fight for their rights." Ethan sensed that Hermione was deeply concerned about the plight of the house elves. Through psychic induction, he began to understand her profound emotions. The inhumane treatment of house elves stirred indignation in Hermione, but it also reflected her own experiences. As a Muggle-born witch, Hermione took pride in her parents' professions as dentists, a respectable occupation in the Muggle world. However, upon entering the magical world, she faced blood discrimination. Despite Ethan's protection, the discrimination hadn't vanished. It had merely become more covert. Hermione was acutely aware of the unfair treatment she received, yet she recognized that her situation was far better than that of the house elves. This realization fueled her determination to advocate for those in even more dire circumstances. Sadly, her efforts seemed to lack support from her companions. Zhang Chu was primarily concerned about the badge's aesthetics, while Astoria had a house elf in her family. Luna appeared indifferent to most matters, and Ginny, though supportive, seemed to do so out of obligation. Ethan's understanding and tolerance, however, provided Hermione with timely comfort. "I think what you said makes sense," Ethan remarked, his words understated yet comforting to Hermione. "I, too, dislike the treatment of house elves. Their poor interaction with wizards reflects poorly on us." He continued, "The treatment of house elves will undoubtedly improve. The wizarding world does not need slaves. Wizards possess sufficient magic to meet most of their needs, which is far more honorable than relying on slaves." Ethan's confidence inspired a change of heart among the others. "Since Ethan has spoken, I'll be the first to admit my mistake," Zhang Chu said, reluctantly accepting a badge before adding, "But please, no more badges. The name and design of your organization are unappealing. Let me redesign it for you." Luna chimed in with her usual whimsical tone. "Count me in, too. I'll write to my parents and ask them to be kind to Jamie," Astoria added earnestly. With Ethan's support, Hermione's initiative, SPW, gained its first batch of supporters, bringing her immense joy, even if their support was primarily for Ethan's sake. Chapter 302. After agreeing on everything, everyone left the tower and made their way back to the castle, leaving Hermione alone with Ethan. "I'm glad you sympathize with house elves and advocate for the weak," Ethan began, his tone shifting to a more serious note. "But with all due respect, if you truly want to help the house elves, relying solely on SPW is not feasible." "Why?" Hermione was puzzled. Ethan had supported her moments ago, so why was he now dismissing her proposal? "There are two of the most difficult tasks in the world," Ethan explained calmly. "The first is to implant your own ideas into someone else's mind, and the second is to transfer someone else's money into your own pocket, and that's precisely what you're attempting to do." "I didn't think of it that way," Hermione retorted, feeling wronged. "I'm not doing this for myself." "But others won't see it that way." Ethan shook his head. "They will only see that fighting for the rights of house elves means paying them wages and granting them holidays. These are seen as unnecessary expenses." "This is not an unnecessary expense," Hermione muttered under her breath, disagreeing internally. In her view, this was what the elves deserved. It was the wizards who were exploiting them. Ethan, ignoring her protest, continued, "For them, these are new expenses. Whether the money goes to you or to the house elves, it's the same in their eyes. Touching their interests is more difficult than reaching their souls." Hermione frowned, losing the will to argue further. She recognized the magnitude of the challenge. Advocating for the rights of house elves meant that wizards had to relinquish their privileges, a daunting task, especially considering the Ministry of Magic officials she had encountered would likely not be receptive. If Gianna supports it, Hermione pondered another approach. Gianna wielded significant influence within the Ministry of Magic. Perhaps she could effect change. However, Ethan remained skeptical. "Even if Gianna backs your reform bill and it's implemented due to our growing influence in the wizarding world, many house elves will likely perish in accidents the moment it's announced." "Why?" Hermione asked, taken aback. "As the most loyal servants, house elves are privy to many of their master's secrets, most of which cannot withstand public scrutiny," Ethan explained with a meaningful tone. "History has shown that no major reform comes without bloodshed and sacrifice. We must proceed cautiously, step by step." He looked at Hermione with a compassionate gaze. "More than the plight of house elves, what wizards need to address is the discrimination based on blood. Eliminating this prejudice is the first step towards self-improvement. It's easier to start with changing ourselves than with the house elves." Hermione was momentarily stunned, her eyes darting away as if caught off guard. Ethan seemed to have touched a nerve. Yet, she responded with determination. "I will continue to try." The situation of house elves, the inhumane treatment they've endured for centuries, has gone on for too long. If no one else will help them, I wish to be the one who does. Her concern for the house elves was genuine, driven by empathy rather than selfish motives. With the support of her friends, she felt empowered to make a difference for those in even more dire circumstances. Ethan shook his head. You still don't grasp my point. I'm trying to tell you that a direct approach won't always lead to your desired outcome. You must learn to navigate the situation more strategically. Hermione's efforts to liberate the house elves directly challenged the status quo, prompting Ethan's cautionary advice. Interests, and forcing such a thing is unlikely to succeed. In this case, we generally have two solutions. First, we can compensate the damaged person with a substitute, such as using a golem to replace a house elf. However, golems capable of replacing house elves are too expensive, making this solution unrealistic to rely on alone. The second int, is to align your purpose with the interests of another group of people, making them feel that achieving this purpose also serves their interests. Then, they will naturally take the initiative to help you suppress those with vested interests. You mean, the thing you just mentioned? Hermione felt she was on the verge of understanding something significant. Yes, I'm referring to the issue of blood discrimination among wizards, Ethan confirmed, pleased with Hermione's quick grasp of the concept. Whether it's discrimination against wizards based on their bloodline, the harsh treatment of house elves, or discrimination against intelligent races such as centaurs and mermaids, all these issues can be framed under the banner of equality. By championing equality, we bundle these issues together. If mixed blood and muggle-born wizards pursue their own equality, they will naturally support the equality of other intelligent races like house elves, centaurs, and mermaids. They will become natural allies. Hermione listened intently, Ethan's words opening a new perspective for her. This approach is similar to why some aspects of political correctness remain popular, despite seeming outrageous to some. It's about tying the principle that the strong should help the weak to a broader cause. Under normal circumstances, most people agree that the strong should transfer benefits to the weak, whether through progressive taxation, giving up seats to those in need, student loans, or the social welfare system. However, problems arise when the definition of weak is applied arbitrarily, turning potentially good intentions into negative outcomes. Essentially, this is a sophisticated political strategy, and its moral alignment depends entirely on the user's intentions. Ethan didn't dwell on this topic, but shifted the conversation. Hermione, from the last conflict between Professor Moody and me, you've seen that not just students, but professors, headmasters, and even Ministry of Magic officials take my words seriously. This is because I've been able to effectively leverage the authority and influence of myself and others like Gianna. Hermione nodded in agreement. Ethan's confrontation with Professor Moody, which resulted in Moody being turned into a toad, had not only avoided punishment for Ethan, but had also earned him the admiration and support of many young wizards. You can do the same, Ethan said earnestly. Me? Hermione was taken aback. Despite her intelligence, she felt insignificant in the magical world. You don't need to start from scratch. Look at our Polytechnic Society. The students there are destined to become influential figures in the magical world. Besides me, you are the primary leader of the society. You can begin by using your current status to influence these young wizards. Once a trend starts forming, you can gradually implement your plans. Ethan paused, giving Hermione time to digest his words. It's not just about changing the mindset of wizards. The deep-seated servility of house elves also requires time to evolve. Ethan, but with this approach, it might take many years to achieve our goal, Hermione remarked seriously. No matter how many years it takes, the important thing is to start making changes now, Ethan replied, emphasizing the long-term commitment required to effect meaningful change. Ethan reached out and gently ruffled the messy brown hair atop Hermione's head. However, it's not enough for you to just be the second in command of the training class. You also need to bolster your reputation and demonstrate your strength through other means, such as the Tri-Wizard tournament. Seeing Hermione's eyes widen in surprise, Ethan's lips curved into a slight smile. You know, for this Tri-Wizard tournament, they would rather have me as an organizer than a competitor. I agreed to their request, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to simply hand over the championship to someone else. Hermione pondered Ethan's words. Be confident, Ethan encouraged, pulling Hermione's face towards him with a smile. You've been studying magic and practicing combat with me for so long. I believe you are the most powerful wizard among the 3 schools. No one can stand against you. But the age limit. Hermione still had her reservations. Cheating in the Triwizard Tournament is a tradition, Ethan whispered, leaning close to Hermione's ear. Moreover, becoming the champion means you can stay at Hogwarts. It's an opportunity to establish a new image for yourself, earning respect not just because of my appointment, but through your own merits. This will make it easier for you to use your increased influence to change people's attitudes towards house elves, rather than starting from scratch on your own. Ethan's words were like the seductive whispers of ancient gods, sowing the seeds of ambition and power in her heart. Come on, Hermione, Ethan thought secretly. With the abilities of Jaina and Onyxia, they are indeed powerful enough to dominate this world, but they are visitors from another realm. Once the door to their world reopens, their focus will inevitably shift back to Azeroth. However, this world still needs someone to oversee it in their stead, someone who won't be distracted by trivial pursuits or the study of magic. There must be a Lich King, and Hermione Granger, you are not just the best candidate for the job, you are the ruler. As Ethan watched the girls retreating back, a sinister smile played across his lips. Don't take the plight of house elves or the debate over blood supremacy too seriously. In the grand scheme of the world, these are minor issues. They merely serve as an introduction to politics. How old is Hermione? It's normal for her to mature, but not everyone in every country is as passionate about history or has 5,000 years of political case studies to draw upon. Finally, it's true that the archetype of the annoying do-gooder is universally disliked, but it's important to understand the reasons behind this disdain and why such figures gain popularity. Ethan's perspective offered a pragmatic view on the complexities of power, influence, and the nuances of political maneuvering, setting the stage for Hermione's ambitious journey. Chapter 303. Hermione did not respond to Ethan's suggestion to become a warrior. However, Ethan noticed that in the days that followed, Hermione became more dedicated to practicing arcane magic and frequently requested Ethan's assistance in her practice. Meanwhile, the preparations for the Triwizard Tournament were progressing steadily. Since mid-September, a significant number of employees from the Ministry of Magic had arrived at Hogwarts. They had cordoned off the Quidditch pitch and a large portion of the Forbidden Forest for construction purposes. Daisy, the Archdruid of the Centaurs, took it upon herself to negotiate with the construction team on behalf of the Centaurs and the magical creatures residing in the Forbidden Forest. She argued that the construction work was severely disrupting their daily lives. The construction team, however, displayed the typical wizarding arrogance and underestimated the Centaurs. Since female Centaurs had not been seen by most wizards for a long time, Daisy's appearance was met with curiosity and inappropriate comments, treating her more like an exhibit than a negotiator. This disrespect infuriated Daisy. The negotiations quickly fell apart, and Daisy, known for her rebellious spirit within the Centaur community, decided to take action. With a mere wave of her hand, the Forbidden Forest seemed to awaken, turning against the wizards. Every creature, magical or not, became hostile towards them. Trees and plants joined the fray, with vines and poisonous flora attacking the construction team. The forest became a labyrinth of dangers, with the team's numbers dwindling as they attempted to escape. In the end, only one traumatized survivor managed to reach Dumbledore for help. Dumbledore, despite his reputation among the Centaurs, found himself at a loss against Daisy, who had grown significantly in power under Ethan's tutelage. Now a level 7 druid, Daisy's command over the forest made her a formidable opponent, even though her raw strength was not on par with Dumbledore's. The Forbidden Forest was her domain, and challenging her there was akin to challenging the forest itself. There's a well-known saying about facing spellcasters: never challenge a mage in their tower, a priest in their temple, or a druid in their forest. Each of these locations amplifies the respective spellcaster's abilities, making them nearly invincible within their domain. For Daisy, the Forbidden Forest was her stronghold, with every creature and plant acting as her ally. Dumbledore realized that unless he was willing to destroy the entire Forbidden Forest, there was no way to contend with Daisy. Thus, the wizards began to refer to her with a mix of fear and respect as the Queen of the Forbidden Forest. This incident significantly elevated Daisy's status and demonstrated the power and autonomy of the magical creatures within the Forbidden Forest. The disturbance in the care of magical creatures class was so significant that even Hagrid was denied entry to the Forbidden Forest. This unusual situation made it clear to the young wizards that the magical creatures within the forest were in rebellion. Ultimately, it was Ethan who intervened to resolve the issue. Ministry of Magic staff were astounded to find that the formidable and fearsome Queen of the Forbidden Forest, who had previously been unyielding even to Dumbledore and had the demeanor of an old man, softened considerably in Ethan's presence. Her smile bloomed like a flower, and her tone became gentle and caring, as though she were addressing a beloved. Terms that had been flatly refused in earlier negotiations were readily accepted by the Queen when proposed by Ethan, without any demand for concessions in return. This preferential treatment was astonishing. Eventually, an agreement was reached. The wizards were to fully respect the habits of the creatures in the Forbidden Forest during their construction activities. All equipment would be removed before Christmas, and a batch of materials would be provided to the forest's creatures as compensation. In return, Daisy, the centaur leader, would release all captured wizards. Moreover, the creatures of the Forbidden Forest agreed not to disturb the construction workers and even offered their assistance. Ethan had suggested the idea of material compensation on his own initiative. Initially, he thought the centaurs were too naive, but after a private meeting with Daisy, he realized they were far from foolish. Daisy understood that as a centaur, she couldn't outwit the wizards in negotiations, so she chose to trust Ethan to represent their interests, confident he would not let them down. Ethan's role in resolving this conflict solidified his position on the Triwizard Tournament Preparatory Committee, and word of his membership gradually spread. With the agreement in place, construction that had been delayed for half a month finally commenced. The students, barred from witnessing the changes firsthand due to curtains obscuring the Quidditch pitch and ministry personnel guarding the Forbidden Forest, were left to speculate wildly about the transformations underway. Some imagined the Quidditch pitch being converted into a colosseum for battling a giant dragon, while others speculated about it becoming a swamp, a notion recorded in historical accounts. Ethan, privy to the actual plans, remained tight-lipped, sharing no details. In the meantime, the fourth-year students noticed a significant increase in their workload. "You are entering an important period in your magical education," Professor McGonagall announced, her eyes gleaming behind her spectacles. "Your OWL exams are approaching." "We don't take the OWLs until 5th grade," Steve protested. "Perhaps, Steve, but believe me, you need to be prepared ahead of time. Only a few in this class can successfully transform a hedgehog into a proper pincushion. Consider adding a treatise on the principles of transfiguration," she suggested. The students wisely chose not to argue, recognizing the futility of complaining about the inevitable increase in their academic burden. Meanwhile, Professor Binns, the ghost who taught history of magic, continued his lectures, oblivious to the students' growing concerns and the exciting developments unfolding around them. The history of magic professor assigned them a task to write a paper on the Goblin Rebellion of the 18th century within the week. Meanwhile, Professor Snape tasked them with researching an antidote, hinting ominously that he would poison one of them before Christmas to test its effectiveness. This threat ensured that none of them took the assignment lightly. Additionally, Professor Flitwick required them to read 3 more books to prepare for learning the summoning spell. This rigorous academic schedule kept the young wizards exceedingly busy, likening them to clockwork tops, spinning tirelessly. However, the atmosphere changed dramatically with the news of the impending arrival of the other 2 schools for the Triwizard Tournament. This announcement spread like wildfire across the campus, momentarily liberating them from their relentless study routine. Chapter 304. One day, as Ethan and Hermione were preparing to head to the auditorium for dinner, they discovered they were unable to proceed further. A large group of students had gathered at the foot of the marble stairs, engrossed in a significant announcement. The student closest to the notice read it aloud, ensuring Ethan and Hermione could hear clearly. Representatives from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang will arrive at 6 p.m. on Friday, October 30th. Afternoon classes will end half an hour early. This announcement acted like a stone thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples of excitement. The news spread like wildfire throughout the school, igniting conversations about the two schools and sparking debates on how they differed from Hogwarts. Despite the comparisons, the consensus among the students was unwavering. Hogwarts was unmatched. Students from every house eagerly hoped that one of their own would emerge as a champion and bring glory to their house. With Ethan not participating in the selection, several upper-year students from nearly every house became the focus of attention. Among them, Cedric Diggory was deemed the most likely to become a champion. This sixth-year Hufflepuff student was renowned for being among the best at Hogwarts, excluding Ethan. Cedric was known for his kindness, friendliness, and willingness to help others. He was a star player on the Quidditch team and the Hufflepuff prefect, consistently achieving top grades in his year. His only known weakness was Zhang Chu from Ravenclaw, making Cedric the epitome of an exemplary student. In anticipation of the guests' arrival, the castle underwent a thorough cleaning. Several portraits, previously marred by grime, were now spotless and looked as good as new. The characters in the paintings donned brand new attire, a stark contrast to their previously tattered appearances. The fat lady of Gryffindor even learned a new song for the occasion, expressing her hope that it would welcome the visiting wizards without frightening them away. The armor lining the corridors was polished to a shine, no longer emitting the distressing creaks when moved, thanks to the school's decision to finally lubricate them. Filch's temperament took a turn for the worse, becoming highly irritable. He would throw tantrums upon seeing a student with unclean shoes, once frightening two first-year girls into hysteria. He even proposed to the headmaster the implementation of a stringent hygiene program, which absurdly required students to avoid leaving any personal items in communal spaces. Naturally, Dumbledore dismissed this proposal as ludicrous. The professors at Hogwarts seemed to be under a spell of irritability as well. During a transfiguration class, Neville Longbottom's attempt at a spell resulted in his ear being fused to a teacup, an error that incensed Professor McGonagall. In a rare moment of sharpness, she admonished Neville, urging him to improve and not to let the visiting schools see such flaws. She even mentioned Ethan, highlighting his mastery of the spell in his first year. When Hermione relayed this incident to Ethan, he explained, "This event is not merely a competition among champions from 3 schools, but also a showcase of talent from several schools. Students and professors from these institutions will join Hogwarts classes, making it a broader contest of skills." Ethan's explanation fueled the students' excitement further. On October 30th, as Ethan entered the auditorium for breakfast, he was amazed to find it transformed overnight, looking completely renewed. Silk banners adorned the walls, each representing a house of Hogwarts. The most prominent banner, hanging behind the teacher's chair, showcased the school emblem with the representative animals of the 4 houses, drawing everyone's attention. That day, the professors deviated from their usual lectures. Instead, they took the time to detail the characteristics of several other magical schools to the young wizards, emphasizing the importance of not embarrassing Hogwarts in front of the visiting chairs and students. As evening approached and the bell rang, students orderly gathered at the door, with the foyer quickly becoming crowded. Prefects and Filch worked diligently to maintain order. "Don't crowd, just line up," Professor McGonagall commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. She then turned to Ron and Parvati, reprimanding them for their attire. "Weasley, straighten your hat, and Miss Patil, remove that ridiculous thing from your hair." Ron adjusted his hat in haste, while Parvati, though visibly displeased, removed a large butterfly headdress from her braid, an accessory also favored by some Ravenclaw students. Among the array of fancy attire, Luna stood out the most. True to her unique style, she donned a sparkling silver dress that seemed composed of countless mirrors, casting colorful reflections with every movement. Complementing her outfit were distinctive radish earrings, complete with emerald green leaves and gold threads, gently swaying from her earlobes. Professor Flitwick, unlike McGonagall, praised Luna for her beauty, adding a touch of calm to the bustling atmosphere. Suddenly, Professor McGonagall approached Ravenclaw, and Ethan mistakenly thought she was about to reprimand Luna. To his surprise, she grabbed his wrist, pulling him to the front row. "You are the finest wizard at Hogwarts, Ethan," she said, adjusting his robes. "And as one of the organizers of the Triwizard Tournament, you represent Hogwarts." It was clear that she saw him as a beacon for the school, a sentiment Ethan found somewhat overwhelming but understood. After all, aside from Krum, no young wizard from Beauxbatons or Durmstrang had a reputation to match Ethan's. Standing beside Ethan, Zhang Chu, a prefect, glanced at the time and mused about the arrival of the Beauxbatons delegation. How did they get here? Did they take the express train? Hermione, also brought to the front by McGonagall, speculated. Maybe a broomstick? No, that's too far. Perhaps it's the portkey. Ethan, however, dismissed the need for guesses. There's no need to wonder anymore. The Beauxbatons delegation has already arrived. Hermione and Zhang Chu followed Ethan's gaze to the horizon, where a black spot was growing larger. What is that? A pack of hippogriffs? Zhang Chu squinted, trying to make out the distant shape. The surrounding wizards also noticed the anomaly, craning their necks for a better view. The black spot expanded, revealing a massive object descending through the clouds, flying low over the forbidden forest and heading their way. "Oh my God, what did I see? A castle flying in the sky!" a first-year student exclaimed in shock. "Idiot, that's clearly a carriage, a flying carriage!" another older wizard corrected excitedly. As the behemoth drew closer, it was indeed a pink-blue carriage, as large as a house, adorned with lavish decorations and bearing a crest on its door, a sight that left everyone in awe. Like two golden-crossed wands, it was pulled into the sky by 12 silver-maned horses with wings, each horse about the size of an elephant. These horses looked majestic, their pupils blood-red, as they swiftly pulled the carriage downward. "That's a rune horse, a type of Pegasus," Ethan explained to Hermione. "Come to think of it, they are distantly related to the Thestrals at Hogwarts." "I'd rather Hogwarts had some rune horses," complained Hermione. "At least they can be seen." A large shadow enveloped the students below. The young wizards standing in the front row hastily stepped back to avoid being hit, but before they could regain their footing, the ground shook violently. A huge carriage landed less than 1 meter in front of them. Then, the door opened. A boy wearing a light blue robe jumped out of the carriage, fumbled to open a golden spiral staircase, and then a magnificently dressed, middle-aged witch stepped out. The students present couldn't help but gasp, Ethan included. This witch was so tall that, of all the people Ethan had met, only Hagrid could compete with her in terms of height. However, her grace, full and luxurious temperament was incomparable to Hagrid's. She was Beauxbaton's headmaster, Madame Maxime. Dumbledore applauded as he stepped forward, and the young wizards also joined in. He gently took the other person's hand and kissed it. Ethan realized he wanted to give Madame Maxime a hug, but after noting the height difference between them, he wisely decided against it. "Dear Madame Maxime," he said, "welcome to Hogwarts." "Dumbledore." Madame Maxime replied in a low voice, "I hope you are well." Then she turned her gaze to Ethan, who was at the edge of the crowd, and said, "And you, Mr. Ethan Green, nice to meet you." At this moment, Ethan's reputation became evident. In the entire Hogwarts, besides Dumbledore, he was the one Madame Maxime paid the most attention to. "Me too, Madame Maxime," Ethan said politely. "On behalf of the students of Hogwarts, I welcome you." Chapter 305, After Madame Maxime. The attention of the young wizards was quickly captured by the students from Beauxbatons, more specifically, by a member of their team. She was an extraordinarily beautiful girl with silver hair. Her shining silver eyes seemed to wield a magical power that struck every teenager present. They felt as if their hearts had been deeply touched for the first time. Their expressions went blank, and they moaned meaninglessly, unable to tear their gaze away from her. After the silver-haired girl glanced at the Hogwarts students, a smile as bright as a sunflower bloomed on her face. She began walking towards them, waving her hand. "Oh my God, she's saying hello to me!" exclaimed a freckle-faced Slytherin boy standing not far behind Ethan. His remark quickly sparked dissatisfaction among the boys around him. They argued and jostled each other until they were silenced by Professor Snape's icy stare. Realizing they had made fools of themselves, they sheepishly separated. The girl rushed straight towards Ethan, enveloping him in a soft embrace. "It's great, Ethan, to finally see you again," she said, before passionately kissing him, oblivious to Dumbledore and Madame Maxime beside her. The Hogwarts students gasped in shock. Many young wizards had already set their sights on winning her affection to bring glory to Hogwarts. Yet, to their dismay, she had thrown herself into Ethan's arms, and the two shared a passionate kiss, initiated forcefully by her. "What a beast!" someone muttered through gritted teeth. The sentiment was echoed by many. It seemed unfair that Ethan not only had the most beautiful witches at Hogwarts around him, but now also the heart of Beauxbaton's most beautiful girl. Amidst the boys' indignation, Zhang Chu and Hermione, standing behind, were also visibly upset. They had recognized her as a formidable rival since the World Cup. They had thought it was a chance encounter that wouldn't happen again and hadn't been vigilant. Now, someone was pursuing Ethan directly from France. They worried that this half-vila might captivate Ethan completely, putting their own positions at risk. At this moment, both witches felt an unprecedented sense of crisis. Astoria, also among the onlookers, was visibly angry, and even Ginny frowned. Only Luna maintained a calm expression. Astoria, curious, asked, "Why aren't you worried?" Luna, putting down the airship model in her hand, gave Astoria a peculiar look. "It's just a kiss. A boyfriend is still a boyfriend," she said, displaying her usual open-mindedness. Astoria and Ginny exchanged speechless glances. Ethan struggled to push Fleur away, her enthusiasm making him uneasy. He could feel several hostile glares from behind. He had always managed his love life carefully, keeping everything in order. Yet, Fleur's unexpected kiss had caught him off guard. "Ethan, I haven't seen you for a few months. Have you missed me?" Fleur asked, still clinging to Ethan's arm, pinching his biceps and gazing into his eyes. "No, we've only met once," Ethan replied, his tone flat, hoping to dissuade her. But Fleur Delacour seemed undeterred. "It's okay. I've missed you very much," she insisted. At that moment, another girl from Beauxbaton's team approached Ethan. Like Fleur, she had beautiful silver hair and blue eyes, but was much shorter, exuding a charm second only to Fleur's, with a youthful appeal. The arrival of the girl made the boys at Hogwarts sigh once more. Another beautiful girl. However, this situation was a bit unusual. The girl approached Ethan and asked curiously, "Are you Ethan Green? Thank you for saving my grandpa. My sister has been thinking about you for the past 2 months." She observed that the boy before her was indeed very handsome and radiated an inexplicable charm. Clearly, her sister had excellent taste. "This is my sister, Gabrielle," Fleur said, gently touching the girl's head as she introduced her. "She's only in the 1st grade." "Hello, Gabrielle," Ethan greeted her. "So, do you want to be my sister's boyfriend?" The girl tilted her head and said, "There are a lot of boys chasing my sister in Beauxbaton, so you have to hurry up." "But your sister and I have only met once before," Ethan replied, finding Gabrielle's straightforwardness amusing. "Is that so?" Gabrielle nodded in understanding, then suddenly said, "Since you're not my brother-in-law yet, can you wait for Gabrielle? When I grow up, you can be my boyfriend." "Gabri," before Ethan could respond, Fleur immediately interrupted her sister. "After a while, my sister got angry. Gabrielle quickly ran away, not forgetting to look back and remind Ethan, "Brother Ethan, you must wait for Gabri." "Sorry, Gabrielle is just joking. Please don't take it seriously," Fleur said apologetically to Ethan. "Gabrielle just likes to joke." "Your sister is really interesting," Ethan smiled slightly. "Did you hear anything?" Hermione suddenly spoke, interrupting their conversation. Ethan nodded and listened carefully. A very loud and strange noise floated towards them from the darkness. It was a muffled rumbling and sucking sound, like a giant vacuum cleaner moving along the riverbed. "There's something in the lake." Zhang Chu also stepped forward, taking Ethan's other arm, and stood beside Fleur. She had never done this in public before. Ethan suddenly felt that Fleur's presence might actually be a good thing, as it seemed to motivate them. At that moment, the calm surface of the Black Lake began to show signs of disturbance. In the center of the lake, there was a commotion under the water. Huge splashes rose on the surface, and the waves crashed against the wet lakeshore. Then, in the center of the lake, a large figure appeared. It was as if a giant plug had been suddenly pulled out from the bottom of the lake. A long, black rod-like object slowly rose from the whirlpool. Then, Harry spotted the sail rigging. "That's a mast!" Fleur covered her mouth in surprise. Slowly and majestically, the large ship rose out of the water, glistening in the moonlight. It looked eerie, like a skeleton, as if it were a newly salvaged shipwreck. The sunken remains of the ship emerged, and the portholes shone with a dim, misty light, resembling ghostly eyes. Finally, with a faint splash, the ship emerged completely, bobbing on the undulating water, and began to sail towards the lakeshore. After a moment, they heard a splash as an iron anchor was thrown into the shallow water, followed by another sound as a wooden plank was laid down on the lakeshore. Many people disembarked from the boat, which was extremely large. As they got closer, everyone realized that the reason they looked so huge was because they all wore fur cloaks with shaggy and tangled fur, and unlike the elegant students from Beauxbatons, they looked more like an army with their disciplined steps. However, the man who led them towards the castle wore a different kind of fur, silvery white, soft and smooth, much like his hair. "Dumbledore!" cried the man enthusiastically as he walked up the slope. "How are you, my dear old fellow?" "Great, thank you, Professor Karkaroff," Dumbledore replied. Karkaroff's voice was round and sweet. "Dear old Hogwarts," he said, looking up at the castle and smiling. "It's so good to be here, so good. Victor, come here and warm yourself up. You don't mind, Dumbledore?" Victor has a slight cold. A boy of 17 or 18 years old walked out from among Durmstrang's students. He looked very strong, and the coat of arms of the Bulgarians swole. The cloak bore the emblem of a team, and the young wizards began to whisper among themselves, recognizing the figure as Victor Krum, the Bulgarian seeker from the Quidditch World Cup a few years prior. They were surprised to learn that this exceptional seeker was actually a student at Durmstrang. The students from Beauxbaton expressed their excitement with bursts of exclamations, with several of them even taking out lipstick, markers, and other items, hoping to get autographs. In fact, after meeting Ethan, they had also sought his autograph. One bold girl went as far as to take out her lipstick and asked Ethan to sign her gown, specifically pointing to the chest area of her ceremonial robe. Furong intervened, driving her away, which caused a moment of embarrassment for Madame Maxime. In contrast, the Hogwarts students were much more composed. For them, Krum's arrival wasn't as surprising. He was merely a world-class Quidditch player, and Hogwarts boasted 2 players who surpassed him, one of whom was standing right in front of them. Krum's thick eyebrows furrowed, and he glared at Ethan, particularly noticing that Ethan was flanked by a beautiful girl on each side, with Hermione standing close by. Krum couldn't help but feel a bit dejected, wondering why Hermione was there with Ethan, who seemed so at ease at Hogwarts. On the other side, Karkaroff's expression darkened. He had specifically brought Krum to Hogwarts to make a statement, but the reaction from everyone fell short of his expectations. His gaze landed on Ethan, his eyes flashing with a hint of resentment. It was all because of this boy. Karkaroff was relieved he had previously convinced Madame Maxime to collaborate with him in ensuring Ethan was not selected as a candidate for the tournament. Otherwise, Durmstrang's position might have been even more precarious. The narrative continues, inviting readers to engage with the story by leaving comments, sending rewards, and voting for the story if they have the means. The author emphasizes the importance of this support, highlighting its significance to them. Chapter 306. Arrival of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. Teachers and students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang had arrived, and at Dumbledore's invitation, everyone finally entered the warm auditorium. Durmstrang students took their seats at the Slytherin table while Beauxbatons was placed at the Ravenclaw table. "Can I sit here with you?" As soon as Ethan sat down, Fleur's clear voice rang in his ears. Without waiting for a response, she, along with Gabrielle, took the seats directly to Ethan's right. This was originally Steve's seat, but now his face flushed red and he stared blankly at the Beauxbatons girl in front of him. When he tried to speak, only a vague guttural sound emerged, as if he was at a loss for words. "Wake up, Steve." Ethan nudged his roommate, channeling psychic powers into him. The power of mechanized mind, akin to the Ice Heart art, immediately snapped him back to reality. Okay, Steve managed to say, albeit awkwardly. He attempted to sit on Ethan's left side, but was met with a pair of stern black eyes. "Supervisor, prefect, is this what you want?" Steve quickly grasped the situation and stepped back. "You please sit down. It doesn't matter if I sit somewhere else." "Then thank you," Zhang-Chu said, expressing her gratitude. She took Luna and sat down directly on Ethan's left side, locking eyes with Fleur. The two exchanged glances, creating an invisible force field around them that deterred any student from approaching within a few meters. This scene left Ethan feeling somewhat overwhelmed. However, the tension wasn't limited to the Ravenclaw table. It also extended to the Gryffindor table. "That half-vila must have enchanted Ethan," Ron whispered to Harry, his tone laced with jealousy. "Certainly not," Hermione retorted sharply. "Ethan didn't gawk at her like some people," she added, casting a proud glance at Ron before picking up her plate and walking away. Despite defending Ethan, Hermione was well aware that Fleur had chosen to sit next to him for a reason. Even as she justified Ethan's actions to Ron, she strategically chose a spot that allowed her to observe Ethan and Fleur closely. Once all the students had settled into their respective house tables, the faculty entered and proceeded to the guest of honor seats. Dumbledore, Maxim, and Karkaroff, as the three highest-ranking officials at the banquet, led the procession. When they took their seats, 3 empty chairs remained at the teacher's bench. Upon seeing Madame Maxime enter, the Beauxbaton students, including Fleur next to Ethan, stood up respectfully. Many Hogwarts students couldn't help but laugh at this display, but the Beauxbaton students showed no embarrassment. They only sat down after Madame Maxime took her seat next to Dumbledore, adhering to Beauxbaton's custom of showing respect to their principal. In contrast, Durmstrang's students showed a lack of etiquette. Despite Karkaroff's suggestive glances, they continued to fiddle with the exquisite dinner plates in front of them, causing Karkaroff's face to darken with irritation. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts, and, especially, distinguished guests," Dumbledore began, his gaze sweeping over the foreign students with a welcoming smile. "It is with great joy that I welcome you to Hogwarts. I hope and believe that you will feel comfortable and happy here. The competition will officially begin at the end of the banquet," he announced. "I now invite everyone to eat and drink as much as you would at home." Instantly, the plates before all the students were piled high with food, courtesy of the house elves' efforts to make the banquet exceptionally lavish. Ethan was surprised to find many new dishes on the table, a testament to the special occasion, all of which were Gallic and Nordic delicacies, likely chosen to cater to the students from Beauxbaton and Durmstrang. Ethan was eager to sample the new dishes, but he soon realized he didn't need to make any effort at all. Fleur served him a bowl of French fish soup with a warm smile. Seeing Fleur's esture, Zhang-Chu also offered him a piece of Norwegian smoked salmon. This initiated a subtle competition between the two women on Ethan's plate. They alternated in offering him food, presenting a Danish hot dog and then a French fried duck breast. Ethan had never felt as full as he did that day. Fortunately, Luna and Gabrielle were preoccupied with each other and didn't join in, or Ethan might have had to resort to some animagus skills to manage the abundance of food at the dinner table. To Ethan, this was a peculiar kind of distress, but to the other young wizards, it was a delightful problem to have. Especially the boys from Beauxbatons, who had never seen Fleur take such initiative with anyone before. At Beauxbatons, Fleur Delacour was known for her aloofness, having set an unparalleled record by rejecting 100 boys consecutively. No one thought she would be surpassed in the next century. Yet, here she was, lively and engaging with a Ravenclaw boy, as if she were a girl Gabrielle's age. What was so special about him? Was it just because he was more handsome, had a more refined demeanor, a higher IQ, stronger, and possessed superior Quidditch skills? Or was it his fame, academic achievements, and notable accomplishments? Regardless, whether it was the boys from Beauxbatons or Hogwarts, seeing their idol humble herself before someone else, yet not receiving any special attention in return, filled them with frustration and jealousy. At that moment, Professor Flitwick also felt like cursing. At the teacher's table, Hagrid, sitting next to him, was staring at Madame Maxime with wide, teary eyes and rapid breathing. Hagrid hadn't been this excited since Norbert's birth. He raised his large wine glass, intending to take a sip to calm his nerves, but instead, he spilled the oatmeal wine all over Professor Flitwick's head. Hagrid, oblivious, smiled sheepishly, picked up his fork again, and accidentally stabbed it into Professor Flitwick's hand. When the last dessert was consumed, Dumbledore stood up once more, and the auditorium fell silent, with everyone looking at him with a mix of nervousness and excitement. 3 new figures had joined Dumbledore, filling the previously empty seats. It was then that Ethan noticed Tonks had arrived at Hogwarts. She caught his gaze and winked at him playfully. "The moment has finally arrived," Dumbledore announced with a smile. "The Triwizard Tournament is about to begin. But before that, please allow me to introduce 3 special guests. Mr. Barty Crouch, Director of the Department of International Cooperation of the Ministry of Magic. Mr. Ludo Bagman, Director of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, and Miss Nymphadora Tonks, Deputy Head of the Auror Office." The auditorium erupted in warm applause. Crouch nodded in his usual manner, Bagman waved enthusiastically in gratitude, and Tonks, shedding her usual carefree demeanor, stood tall and proud in her striking red and white Auror uniform, receiving the loudest applause. "By the way, Mr. Ethan Green, please join us as well," Dumbledore suddenly called out Ethan's name. "In the past few months, Mr. Crouch, Mr. Bagman, and our Mr. Green have made significant contributions to the Triwizard Tournament. They will join our 3 headmasters on the judging panel." Even though the news of Ethan's involvement in organizing the tournament had been circulating quietly, hearing it announced officially still surprised many. Standing among these adult wizards, Ethan still caused a stir, eliciting waves of exclamations. Dumbledore then turned his attention to Tonks. "As for Miss Tonks, let us welcome her back to her alma mater, 5 years after her graduation." The announcement was met with warm applause, especially from the senior students. Given Tonks' youth and her recent status as a student, many present were her former classmates. Let us thank Miss Tonks and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for their support. During the Triwizard Tournament, Miss Tonks will be responsible for the security of the competition. Dumbledore continued. "Now, Mr. Filch, please bring up the box." "We have officially finalized the events for this year's Triwizard Tournament," Dumbledore announced slowly. At his cue, Filch placed an antique, jewel-inlaid wooden box on the table in front of Dumbledore. "There are 4 events in total, scheduled throughout the school year. They are designed to test the champions' magical talents, courage, reasoning abilities, and their capacity to overcome danger." Dumbledore glanced meaningfully at Ethan. Since Ethan had joined the preparatory committee, many aspects of the Triwizard Tournament had been transformed. "I believe you are all aware that only 3 champions can represent their respective schools in the competition," Dumbledore continued. "Their performance in each event will determine their scores. After all events are completed, the champion with the highest score will win the Triwizard Cup. The Goblet of Fire, an absolutely impartial selector, will choose the champions." With that, Dumbledore tapped the wooden box with his wand 3 times. The lid creaked open, revealing a rough, hand-carved wooden cup with a blue-white flame dancing inside. Dumbledore carefully placed the Goblet of Fire atop the wooden box for all to see clearly. "Every student wishing to compete must write their name and school on a piece of parchment and throw it into this goblet," Dumbledore stated solemnly. "Those interested in becoming a champion have 24 hours to register. Tomorrow night, on Halloween, the goblet will select the names of the 3 students it deems most worthy to represent the 3 schools. Tonight, the goblet will be placed in the hall, accessible to all students who wish to enter the competition. To prevent underage students from attempting to enter, I will cast an age line around the goblet once it is placed in the hall. No one under the age of 17 can cross this line. Finally, I urge every student considering participation to understand that this competition is not to be taken lightly. Once chosen by the Goblet of Fire, a champion is bound to see the competition through to the end. Entering your name into the cup forms a magical contract that must be honored. Once you become a champion, there is no turning back. So please think carefully before you decide to enter your name and make sure you are truly prepared to compete. Now, I believe it's time for everyone to head to bed. Good night, everyone. Chapter 307. After his announcement, Dumbledore, accompanied by the faculty and staff, exited the auditorium. However, the atmosphere inside remained charged with excitement. The students, buzzing with discussions about the Goblet of Fire, seemed undeterred by the news that Ethan would not be competing. Even Steve was eager to corner Ethan, convinced he had a way to bypass the age restriction. Ethan, however, paid him no mind and turned his attention to Fleur, who stood beside him. "Where will you be staying tonight?" he inquired. Fleur responded with a charming smile. "Do you really wish we could stay at your place?" "You know that's not what I meant," Ethan replied, rolling his eyes, which only made Fleur chuckle. She then explained, "Don't worry, we won't be staying overnight at Hogwarts Castle. During the Triwizard Tournament, we'll be in carriages. After all, I understand. It's crucial to stay vigilant," Ethan said, smiling. He knew the Triwizard Tournament was far from a friendly exchange. It was a fierce competition for glory. Each school would seize any opportunity to gain an advantage, including recruiting outsiders. As Beauxbaton's delegation began to depart, Ethan encountered Tonks again. The female Auror was overwhelmed, dealing with a group of eager young wizards. Her position as the deputy director of the Auror office made her particularly appealing to those aspiring to the profession. Clearly uncomfortable with the attention, her hair had turned the color of bitter melon. Upon seeing Ethan, Tonks greeted him with relief. "The young wizards here are so enthusiastic," she lamented. "I was never this popular when I was a student. They all thought I was the biggest troublemaker." She reminisced about her Hogwarts days, mentioning how Professor Sprout was surprised at her becoming the deputy director of the Auror office. "She didn't even let me be a prefect, despite my being top of my class." "But you've proven yourself," Ethan reassured her. "You've shown that your magic is not only good for pranks, but has also made you an excellent Auror. Professor Sprout was wrong not to make you a prefect." Tonks looked at Ethan with a softness in her eyes. "Thanks for the reassurance, Ethan, but I wouldn't have achieved so much without meeting you." Together, they strolled around Hogwarts, with Tonks in a reflective mood. Ethan even procured 2 glasses of beer, and as they walked, Tonks shared tales from her student days. She spoke of the insults from the Black family due to her background. "But now you're a respected Auror, and they're not," Ethan said dismissively. "What does the Black surname bring besides a tarnished legacy?" As they passed the astronomy tower, Tonks confessed her envy of Ethan's flying skills. "I once crashed into the Owlery, the Homping Willow, Hagrid's garden, and even here, through the glass. I admire your flying ability." "If you'd like, I can teach you a spell to fly without a broom," Ethan offered. "Atmospheric wings not only allows you to fly, but also protects you with airflow, so you'll never fall again." Tonks continued to share stories of her mischief, including transforming into a professor using her metamorph magus abilities and causing chaos in the potions classroom with a stolen poisonous tentacle from Professor Sprout. Ethan was astounded when he learned about Tonks's history of mischief and bravery. He had always thought George and Fred Weasley were the ultimate troublemakers at Hogwarts, but it turned out Tonks was in a league of her own. Her antics ranged from tricking Professor Snape and getting imprisoned to detonating dung bombs in the herbology classroom. However, Tonks's time at Hogwarts wasn't just about causing trouble. In her 4th year, she mastered the Patronus charm on her own, aiding her friends in repelling Dementors. By her 5th year, she had joined forces with classmates to assist Patricia Lackpick, the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at the time, in uncovering a cursed vault within Hogwarts, thwarting a sinister plot. Tragically, in her Xth year, Patricia Lackpick retaliated against Tonks and her friends, resulting in the death of one of their own, Ron Carner. Motivated by a desire for vengeance, Tonks used her skills as a disguise magus to infiltrate an organization known as R's Organization, leading to a direct confrontation where she captured a key member. By her 7th year, she and her group had supported the Aurors in defeating the organization, earning her a position as an intern Auror. Ethan learned of these unknown adventures from Tonks herself as they sat on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest, sharing a large glass of beer. It was then he understood why Tonks had fearlessly ventured into the cave alone during their previous encounter. The mention of Ron Carner's death brought tears to Tonks' eyes, revealing a depth of sadness and loss. Later, as Tonks succumbed to a mix of sorrow and intoxication, Ethan helped her back to her tower. After ensuring she was comfortably in bed, he attempted to leave, only to be pulled back by Tonks in a surprising display of affection. Overwhelmed by her feelings, which had been amplified by her use of psychic abilities, Tonks acted on her long-suppressed desires. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, Ethan resigned himself to the moment, rationalizing it as the consequence of Tonks's reckless use of her powers. That night, Tonks, leveraging her abilities as a disguise magus, transformed into various figures, including celebrities and fictional characters, much to Ethan's bemusement. Reflecting on the experience, Ethan humorously critiqued the appearances of the personas Tonks had adopted. The next morning, Tonks was nowhere to be found, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. She had fled, embarrassed by her actions, taking with her not just memories of the night, but also Ethan's sheets. Despite the chaos of the night before, Ethan remained calm, reflecting on the experience as he made his way back to Hogwarts. Tonks' story, as shared by Ethan, draws from Harry Potter Hogwarts Mystery, a mobile game that explores the untold stories of Hogwarts. Between 1984 and 1991, the content is quite rich. The picture displays a young version of Tonks. Chapter 308, Today is Saturday. Logically, students would typically have breakfast much later on weekends. However, when Ethan and Hermione arrived at the auditorium, they found it more crowded than on regular school days. Everyone's attention was fixed on the goblet of fire, which was placed at the center of the foyer on the stool usually reserved for the sorting hat. A thin line of gold, forming a square 10 feet on each side, encircled the cup, creating a boundary. Dozens of young wizards, their faces alight with curiosity and anticipation, surrounded the goblet of fire. Despite not meeting the age requirement, they were eager to experience what it felt like to be a champion. Yet, every attempt to breach the invisible barrier was thwarted by a mysterious force that repelled them. The more force they applied, the stronger the pushback they received. One particularly determined young wizard charged from the auditorium's door, aiming to penetrate the barrier with sheer momentum. Unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. The excessive force of the barrier not only prevented his passage, but also caused him injury, sending him tumbling to the ground. He was promptly taken to the school infirmary for treatment. At that moment, someone exclaimed, "Look, everyone, Cedric is here." The crowd turned to see Cedric Diggory, accompanied by a group of Hufflepuff students, making his way toward the goblet of fire. With a modest smile, he seemed somewhat overwhelmed by the attention. Unlike the others, the mysterious power did not hinder him, and he successfully placed his name into the goblet of fire, eliciting cheers from the onlookers. Cedric was the first student from Hogwarts to successfully register for the competition. Following Cedric, several other students managed to register, including Gryffindor's chaser, Angelina Johnson. Her successful registration was met with thunderous applause and cheers. George and Fred Weasley, arm in arm, approached with pieces of paper in hand, clearly concocting some mischief. "Do they intend to sign up too?" "Ron knows them best," someone remarked skeptically. "That's impossible. They're still several months shy of their 17th birthday." "Who says it's impossible?" George and Fred approached with mischievous grins. "We've got it covered this time. We just drank that stuff." "What did you drink?" Ron asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Aging potion," they declared triumphantly. "Just a drop each. It'll make us 17 years old." Hermione, bewildered, turned to Ethan. "Is this going to work?" Ethan nodded, then quickly reconsidered. Aging potions can indeed temporarily advance one's physical age by altering bone and dental age, so theoretically, George and Fred's plan might work. However, Considering the age limit was set by Dumbledore himself, I doubt he'd overlook such an obvious loophole. As Ethan finished his explanation, a commotion arose from the crowd. George and Fred had crossed the golden boundary and were now walking back toward the onlookers, smirking triumphantly. This encouraged Ron, who believed that if they could bypass the age restriction, so could he. He was about to challenge Ethan's skepticism when suddenly the golden boundary flashed, and George and Fred were violently ejected. The sound of porcelain shattering and a sharp scream diverted everyone's attention. Caught by an unseen force, the Weasley twins were hurled through the air. George crashed into a long table, breaking a stack of dishes, while Fred landed amidst a group of startled students. The incident served as a stark reminder of the Goblet of Fire's stringent enforcement of the rules, leaving no room for loopholes or mischief. While his brother Fred collided with Angelina, who had just stumbled onto the parchment, the room erupted in whistles and laughter. Initially, Angelina intended to assist him, but she recoiled in surprise upon seeing Fred's face, instinctively pushing him away. Fred's head hit the ground with a loud thud. After a moment, Fred scrambled to his feet. "Oh my God, Fred, you've grown a Bia, RD." The two exchanged looks and burst into laughter. George, driven by curiosity, reached out and tugged at the beard, only to realize it was indeed real, not a trick. "Ouch! Can't you be a bit gentler? You've got one yourself, you know," Fred complained, swatting George's hand away. Their misfortune amused the young wizards watching the scene. "It seems Dumbledore has indeed sealed the loophole, but unfortunately, I'm not yet skilled enough to cast a powerful Confundus charm," Fred said, frustrated. "There's always a way," George replied, rolling his eyes and teasing Angelina. "You two looked perfectly matched when you fell." George's laughter ceased when he noticed Angelina's shy expression. "No way, are you serious?" he asked, a hint of panic in his voice. He turned to Fred. "When did this start? How come I didn't know?" He suddenly feared being left out by his brother, sparking another round of sibling rivalry. Meanwhile, Ethan and Hermione were discussing their own dilemma. "What should we do, Ethan? I want to become a champion, as you said, but Dumbledore's security is too tight, and even an aging potion won't work. I can't see a way through," Hermione expressed her concern. "Expand your thinking," Ethan advised, tapping his temple. "If we can't break through Dumbledore's barrier, we'll find a way around it. Intelligence always finds a path." He then suggested, "Try your own method to trick the age line and the goblet first. If that fails, I'll share the correct way." Agreeing, they headed to the library for inspiration. On their way, they encountered the ghost of Ravenclaw, Ms. Grey, who floated by with grace. She acknowledged Ethan with a nod and a lingering gaze, which did not go unnoticed by Hermione. "Why does Miss Grey only acknowledge you? You haven't done anything to her, have you?" Hermione asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "You're overthinking it. She's a ghost. It's not like you can do much with a ghost," Ethan replied, playfully nibbling Hermione's cheek when he noticed they were alone. Hermione blushed deeply, momentarily distracted from her earlier concern. Ethan sighed in relief. Hermione was partially correct. He and Helena, the ghost, shared a unique connection. His wife's remains were still in his possession. As a result, Helena served as his spy, having been instructed by Ethan the previous day to monitor Professor Moody's actions closely. Her nod to Ethan was a signal that Moody had successfully entered Harry's name into the Goblet of Fire. Chapter 309. After lunch, the foyer was almost deserted, and Hermione was poised to challenge Dumbledore's age restriction. Ethan stood by, arms folded, observing the scene. Fleur and Jiang Chu also joined to watch the attempt. Fleur had arrived on her own accord, and seeing her persistent interest in Ethan, Jiang Chu abandoned his prefect duties to follow. "Let's start with the simplest approach," Hermione mused. She walked up to the edge of the age line, took out a pre-written piece of parchment from her pocket, folded it into a paper airplane, aimed for the Goblet of Fire, and launched it. "It seems this might actually work." Jiang Chu's eyes sparkled as she watched the paper plane gracefully arc through the air, successfully crossing the age line and descending into the blue-white flames. However, just as they thought Hermione's plan had succeeded, the flames surged, incinerating the paper airplane and ejecting its ashes to the floor. "What a shame, it seems that won't work." Zhang Chu sighed. Undeterred by the setback, Hermione had spent the entire morning brainstorming various methods. "The goblet of fire is coming," she exclaimed, attempting to summon the goblet with a levitation charm. However, the goblet remained unmoved. "As expected, there's no loophole there," she concluded, then took out another piece of paper with her name on it. With a flick of her wand, she transformed the burnt fragments on the ground into an owl, which took the note from her hand and flew towards the goblet of fire. "What a beautiful transformation!" Fleur exclaimed, her admiration for Hermione growing. Despite Hermione's youth and ineligibility for the tournament, her mastery of transfiguration marked her as a formidable contender. Fleur found herself respecting Hermione, recognizing her as a worthy rival chosen by Ethan. Fleur stole a glance at Ethan, her feelings mixed. She had been smitten with him since he saved her grandfather, perhaps even considering it love at first sight. As a Vila descendant, Fleur was accustomed to adoration and flattery from countless men, which only refined her discerning taste. Men who resisted her charm intrigued her, especially if they possessed a comparable allure. Ethan, with his heroic deeds, fame, and strength, had captivated her from the moment they met. The prospect of participating in the Tri-Wizard tournament at Hogwarts thrilled Fleur, as it meant she could see Ethan again. Upon arrival, she found Ethan as charismatic and powerful as ever, but also surrounded by formidable competitors. Zhang Chu, for instance, matched her in beauty, though she lacked the Vila's natural charm. Luna, another contender, had an ethereal quality about her. And now Hermione Granger, though more focused on her studies and less on her appearance, proved to be a strong competitor with her impressive magical skills. Fleur's thoughts returned to Ethan. She had learned that his goal was to assist Hermione in entering the Goblet of Fire. While Fleur didn't relish the idea of Hermione becoming a competitor, she also saw an opportunity. If Hermione's attempt failed, it might mean Nivunicida. The guarantee of the male god was at risk of becoming invalid, a situation Fleur Delacour desperately wanted to avoid. Amidst her internal conflict over potential gains and losses, Hermione Granger was diligently controlling an owl, attempting to breach the age line surrounding the Goblet of Fire. To her dismay, she found that no matter how high the owl soared, a magical force repelled it upon crossing the age line, similar to the fate of those who tried to force their way through physically. "It appears the protective range of the age line extends vertically as well," Hermione mused, stroking her chin thoughtfully. So, attempting to fly over it with a broom would be futile. With a flick of her wand, the owl transformed into a pangolin. Hermione carefully lifted a floor tile, intending for the pangolin to burrow underneath the age line. However, it encountered an invisible barrier, thwarting its progress. After several unsuccessful MPTs, Hermione managed to drop a note into the Goblet of Fire multiple times, only for it to be ejected by the blue and white flames moments later. It was clear that Dumbledore had nearly every possible loophole covered. A spark of inspiration struck Hermione as she turned to Fleur. "Miss Delacour," she exclaimed, stepping forward, "may I ask for your assistance?" Fleur, puzzled by the sudden request, wondered why she, a mere bystander in this scenario, was being involved. Hermione, with an earnest expression, explained, "Miss Delacour, you've successfully entered your name into the Goblet of Fire today, meeting the age requirement. Could you please help me submit this note?" Fleur was taken aback. It was one thing to not report Hermione for attempting to circumvent the rules, but to actively assist her was another matter entirely. Despite her initial reluctance, Fleur's resolve softened under Hermione's hopeful gaze. "All right, I'll do it for you," she conceded, taking the note and approaching the age line, which allowed her to pass without issue and deposit the note into the goblet. However, Hermione's anticipation was short-lived. The note was ejected by the goblet's flames just as it had been before. "It seems that one must submit their name personally for it to be accepted," Hermione concluded, her spirits dampened by the realization. This was a fundamental rule, as Barty Crouch Jr. had been able to enter Harry Potter's name without his consent using a powerful Confundus charm. If proxy submissions were permitted, the Goblet of Fire's purpose would be undermined. After exhausting every conceivable method, a disheartened Hermione turned to Ethan, apologizing for her failure to breach the age line. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I did everything I could, but I couldn't get your name in. I've let you down, she said, too ashamed to meet his gaze. Ethan, however, was far from disappointed. Disappointed? Not at all. I'm impressed by your creativity and effort. Magic thrives on imagination, he reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. It's understandable that you couldn't bypass the age line. After all, if Dumbledore had set the age restriction to 27 instead of 17, then no senior wizard from any of the 3 schools would have been able to enter. Fleur, overhearing their conversation, couldn't hide her irritation. As a senior wizard herself, she felt underestimated. Ethan, noticing her reaction, simply shrugged. Of course, there are still many opportunities for magic to surprise us. There are ways to bypass the age line in the Goblet of Fire, but the required level of magic is quite high, Ethan explained as he summoned his magic wand. For instance, we could use a powerful anti-magic force field to forcibly remove the magical effects of the age line and the Goblet of Fire. As he spoke, he waved his wand, and Fleur was astonished to see the age line in front of her eyes seemingly erased, as if by an eraser, with most of it disappearing. Ethan waved his wand again, and the age line returned to its original state. Alternatively, we could use space spells to force our way in. As he said this, Ethan's hair transformed into red feathers ablaze with flames. In a flash, he appeared next to the Goblet of Fire. Then, in another flash, he was back to his original position. Or, we could transform ourselves into spirit beings. Without explaining how, Ethan's entire being turned black and white, and he became translucent, floating in the air like the ghosts of Hogwarts. For a moment, Fleur thought he had died, but transforming into a spirit could indeed bypass the age line, a possibility Dumbledore hadn't considered. He is indeed the man I've fallen in love with. He's so incredible, Fleur exclaimed, hugging Ethan like a little girl. Get your hands off him. Zhang-Chu couldn't bear it any longer and stepped forward to pull Fleur away. Hermione had believed from the start that Ethan could cross the age line, but even after witnessing his methods, she still frowned. Ethan, your method is effective, but it seems overly complex, she said calmly. It might sound a bit presumptuous, but I still want to ask, is there a way I can do it myself? Of course there is, Ethan nodded. This method is actually not complicated. Not only you, but any young wizard with a certain level of skill can actually do it. Chapter 310. Ethan's statement seemed exaggerated, but Zhang-Chu and Forong were both a bit skeptical, despite their recent admiration for Ethan's advanced magical technique. You claim that you can solve it with your powerful magic skills, yet you also mention a method that ordinary wizards can use. That seems impossible. Zhang-Chu couldn't help but express his doubt. Even Hermione appeared skeptical. Ethan didn't respond directly, but instead posed a question. Miss Granger, based on our recent attempt, have you discerned the rules governing the Goblet of Fire and the age line? Of course, Hermione replied promptly. The Goblet of Fire is enchanted, making it resistant to simple spells like the Flying Curse and others. Additionally, the Goblet of Fire and the age line stipulate that only wizards over 17 years old can submit their names, and the submission must be done in person. Attempts to drop names from afar or having someone else submit on one's behalf are futile. After Hermione finished, she looked at Ethan confidently, as if to say, "See how well I've summarized it." However, Ethan simply shook his head. "No, your explanation lacks specificity." Not specific enough? Hermione was taken aback and flustered. But I've tried to cover all the rules. I can't think of anything else. Ethan then revealed the answer himself. Actually, the precise rule is that the age line prevents all young wizards under the age of 17, as well as non-wizard creatures from entering. The Goblet of Fire will only accept names if you personally place your name into it. Is there a difference? Zhang-Chu and Forong exchanged puzzled looks. Aren't you describing the same thing? But Hermione caught the nuance. What you're saying is that the Goblet of Fire and the age line are two distinct entities. She looked at Ethan with eyes full of admiration. The Goblet of Fire is just that, and the age line is separate. The rule for the Goblet of Fire is that anyone can submit a name, but it must be their own and done personally. As for the age line, it merely ensures that those who don't meet the criteria can't cross it. However, if you submit your name without crossing the line, It doesn't object, so I can use a paper airplane to send in my name. Exactly. Ethan praised Hermione's insight. But what good does this knowledge do? Hermione pondered. I still can't cross the age line to submit my name personally. If you can't cross the distance to place your name into the Goblet of Fire, then let the Goblet of Fire come to you, Ethan suggested, as if discussing a simple solution to hunger. But the flying curse and such. Hermione suddenly realized something and turned to Fleur. Could I ask for one more favor, please? What's the request this time? Fleur was still trying to follow the conversation. Didn't I fail to submit on your behalf earlier? I don't need you to submit for me this time, Hermione clarified, pointing to the Goblet of Fire on the table. This time, you just need to bring the cup to me. Fleur was taken aback. Is that allowed? Let's find out, Hermione suggested, pointing to the Goblet of Fire. Feeling 80% confident in Ethan's idea, Hermione hadn't observed Dumbledore casting any other spells besides the age line. Then I'll give it a try, Fleur agreed, hurried to the Goblet of Fire, and carefully reached out her hand. To her surprise, she easily picked up the Goblet of Fire. This is too easy, Fleur exclaimed, crossing the age line with the enormous goblet, her voice filled with excitement. I can't believe we actually circumvented Dumbledore's magic like this. Fleur looked at Ethan with admiration, not underestimating the simplicity of the method. After all, numerous young wizards had tried various complex methods without success. Ethan had tried it before them, but no one had ever thought of this method. It's just a misunderstanding. Everyone is imperfect sometimes, Ethan said with a smile, not taking it seriously. Hermione, standing before the Goblet of Fire, inserted the parchment with trembling hands. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. After a full minute, the blue-white flame did not eject the paper. Instead, she watched as the parchment turned completely to ashes. She had succeeded. She had become a candidate for the tournament so easily. Overwhelmed with excitement, Hermione hugged Ethan and, on impulse, kissed him on the lips. Jiangqiu and Fleur, standing nearby, were visibly frustrated. They had been competing with each other, not expecting Hermione to outmaneuver them. Aren't you usually very slow? Even Ethan was surprised. This wasn't the first time Hermione had kissed him impulsively, but it was the first time it had been so intense. Despite the awkwardness, it was a step towards growth, seemingly spurred by Fleur's pressure. 2 minutes later, Hermione ran away shyly, and Ethan didn't chase after her, letting her have some time to calm down. Meanwhile, he, along with Jiangqiu, took Fleur and Gabrielle on a tour of Hogwarts. As night fell, the Great Hall was decorated in a spooky manner for Halloween. Black bats with jack-o'-lanterns in their mouths flew about, the candlelight dimmed, and ghosts appeared to greet the young wizards. When Ethan and Fleur arrived in the Great Hall for dinner, the tables of the 4 houses were already bustling with students. The Goblet of Fire had been moved closer to the teacher's table. The festive atmosphere did little to calm the students' restlessness. Really wish it was Angelina, Fred said hopefully at the Gryffindor table. George, unusually silent, seemed to be in a serious mood, indicating a possible quarrel between the two. Hermione, though not voicing her thoughts, was visibly anxious, her breathing quickened with anticipation. Despite the rich array of dishes prepared by the house elves, the students' attention was elsewhere. Their anxious glances frequently turned towards Dumbledore, eagerly awaiting the announcement of the chosen champion. As the last of the pumpkin desserts vanished and the golden plates returned to their pristine state, the hall erupted in chatter. Then, Dumbledore stood, and silence fell. Well, the moment you've all been waiting for is upon us, Dumbledore announced. The Goblet of Fire is about to make its decision. The tension in the Great Hall was palpable. Karkaroff and Madame Maxime watched Dumbledore intently, their expressions as nervous and expectant as the students. Ludo Bagman was all smiles, winking at students from various schools, while Mr. Crouch appeared disinterested, almost bored. Tonks, maintaining her aura's posture, was noticeably avoiding Ethan's gaze, a stark contrast to her behavior the day before. Dumbledore, however, made eye contact with Ethan. Ethan gestured for him to join the other organizers, indicating that as a member of the organizing committee, he should be seated with them at this crucial time. Ethan immediately walked to the teacher's table and deliberately sat next to Tonks, positioning his body close to hers. He noticed that the moment he made contact, the female aura's body tensed up significantly. "Well, it's time for the goblet to make its decision," Dumbledore announced. "It will probably take another minute. Look, when the champions' names are announced, I want them to proceed to the top of the auditorium, walk along the staff table, and enter the room through the door behind the staff desk." He gestured towards the door. "There, they will receive initial instructions." Updated 5/4, additional update 5094. Please support me with custom orders, flowers, monthly votes, comments, and rewards. If you have votes, please cast them for me as the author. This is really important to me. Chapter 311. Dumbledore took out his wand and waved it widely. The candles, except for those in the jack-o'-lanterns, were extinguished, plunging the auditorium into semi-darkness. The goblet of fire, now the brightest object in the room, emitted a dazzling light. Its blue-white flames, bursting with sparks, captivated everyone's attention. Several affluent Slytherins impatiently checked their pocket watches, anticipating the announcement. Suddenly, the flame in the goblet turned red, and with a crackle, sparks flew. A tongue of fire leaped into the air, ejecting a piece of burnt parchment. The auditorium held its breath as Dumbledore caught the parchment, holding it at arm's length to read the name illuminated by the flame's glow. The flame then reverted to its blue-white color. "Durmstrang's champion," Dumbledore announced clearly and forcefully, "is Viktor Krum." Polite applause filled the auditorium, though the enthusiasm was less than what Krum might have received had he caught the golden snitch in the Quidditch World Cup. Karkaroff, beaming with pride, clapped vigorously. "Well done, Victor. I knew it was you." Viktor Krum, looking listless, stood up from the Slytherin table and made his way towards Dumbledore. His demeanor had changed ever since he learned that Ethan had become an organizer rather than a competitor. Krum had been defeated by Ethan in a nearly humiliating manner during the World Cup, and had been eager to prove himself in the Triwizard Tournament, especially to Hermione, to show he was no less worthy than Ethan. However, with Ethan now an organizer, Krum felt that winning the tournament would only serve to deepen his humiliation. Guided by a Gryffindor, Krum turned right, walked past the staff table, and entered room 303 through the door. The auditorium fell silent again, anticipation building for the announcement of the next champion. After a few moments, the Goblet of Fire's flames turned red once more, and a second piece of parchment was propelled out. "The champion of Beauxbatons," Dumbledore declared, "is Fleur Delacour." Fleur rose gracefully, her silver hair shimmering as she received enthusiastic applause, mainly from the boys. She glided between the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff tables before disappearing into the next room, leaving the auditorium in eager silence once again. The focus now shifted to the Hogwarts champion. With Ethan not participating, the suspense was palpable. Each house hoped for a champion from among their ranks. Cedric Diggory, with a warm smile and a calm demeanor, betrayed only by his tensely gripped cutlery, Angelina from Gryffindor, who muttered under her breath while staring intently at the Goblet of Fire, and Roger Davis from Ravenclaw, who craned his neck in anticipation, all awaited the announcement. The Slytherins, particularly the upperclassmen, were almost at odds over who would secure the nomination. The third piece of parchment flew out swiftly. "The Hogwarts champion," Dumbledore began, his voice filled with surprise. He turned towards the Gryffindor table, announcing each word distinctly, "Hermione Granger." Under the watchful eyes of the entire auditorium, Hermione stood up gracefully. Harry and Ron were stunned. They had no idea Hermione had even entered the competition. The auditorium, previously buzzing with anticipation, fell into a stunned silence. The room fell silent as the young wizard's presence stared at Hermione with a mix of wonder, questioning, and admiration. Although not as famous as Ethan, Hermione had always been the academic leader, second only to him. Initially, the title Miss Know-It-All was meant to be derogatory, but as Hermione continued to prove her worth, it gradually transformed into a badge of honor. Moreover, the members of the Erudite Society unanimously supported Hermione, convinced of her capabilities. After joining the Polytechnic Society, the young wizards witnessed another aspect of Ethan's brilliance. He often missed classes due to his commitments to work and experiments. As the current leader of the society, Hermione was not only responsible for administrative tasks, but also had to cover for Ethan's absences and assist in teaching. Over time, Hermione's reputation within the society grew significantly. Her selection as a champion was acknowledged even by the senior wizards within the society. However, the reaction from the wizards of the other two schools was much more intense. Fleur and Krum, who had lingered in the auditorium, paused and turned around. Fleur appeared unsurprised, while Krum was visibly shocked. He had hoped to prove himself to Hermione through the Triwizard Tournament, not expecting her to become his competitor, leaving him somewhat bewildered. Karkaroff, unable to contain his frustration, slammed his hand on the table and stood up, glaring at Dumbledore. "Albus, if I recall correctly, the rules state that a champion must be an adult wizard over 17, not a 15-year-old child." "Patience, Karkaroff. You remember correctly. As for why Hermione is an exception, you'll have to ask her," Dumbledore replied, intrigued. Hermione's selection as a champion was unexpected, but upon reflection, Dumbledore found it fitting. Since her first year, Hermione's abilities and potential had caught his attention. Facing the crowd's inquiries, Hermione remained calm, having anticipated such a reaction. "I simply wrote my name and school on a piece of parchment and placed it in the Goblet of Fire at the specified time. It seems the goblet chose me as Hogwarts champion." Karkaroff, suspecting foul play, demanded to know how Hermione circumvented the age restriction. The young wizards in the auditorium also looked on curiously, awaiting her response. Hermione clarified, "No, you're mistaken. I didn't tamper with Professor Dumbledore's enchantments." This statement caused an uproar. Not only did Karkaroff express his doubts, but Madame Maxime also stood, questioning the legitimacy of Hermione's selection. Many young wizards voiced their discontent, calling for Hermione's disqualification. Unperturbed by the skepticism, Hermione pointed to the Goblet of Fire and explained, "Who said you have to bypass the age line to submit your name? Couldn't someone who meets the age requirement submit it on my behalf?" She continued, "According to the rules, all I had to do was write my name and school on a parchment and place it in the goblet, which I did." Hermione's explanation left the young wizards pondering, revealing a clever adherence to the rules rather than an exploitation of them. It felt a bit absurd. They had pondered over it for an entire day, experimenting with various methods, yet they couldn't breach the age line. However, Hermione had managed to bypass this obstacle with such a straightforward strategy. George and Fred were so frustrated that they hadn't conceived this approach themselves that they literally beat their chests in regret. Although Karkaroff and Maxim were hard-pressed to accept this reality, they had to concede that Hermione's method effectively skirted the restrictions. They even harbored suspicions that Dumbledore might have intentionally left this loophole for Hermione to exploit. However, upon observing Dumbledore, they noticed his face was marked by genuine surprise, dispelling any notion of his complicity. It took a moment for Dumbledore to collect himself before he admitted, with a rueful smile, "This was indeed an oversight on my part. Professor, my magical prowess is nowhere near yours, so I had to resort to some clever tactics." Hermione responded modestly. In this instance, she omitted any mention of Ethan, taking all the credit herself. This was a prearranged decision. After all, Ethan was already an organizer and would be a judge in the future. To ensure fairness, it was crucial to avoid any appearance of bias, at least outwardly. The Triwizard Tournament might have a history of bending the rules, but that didn't mean it could be done flagrantly. The underlying rule was simple. If you weren't caught, you hadn't cheated. Hermione's explanation was accepted by all, as even the most novice wizard could conceive such a cunning plan. Yet, Dumbledore still commended the girl. "There's no shame in your actions, Miss Granger. For wizards, intellect and strength hold equal value. You've taught us a valuable lesson." He paused, scanning the room to ensure he had everyone's attention. Sometimes, the might of one's power isn't the deciding factor in victory or defeat. Miss Granger has demonstrated that intelligence and unique approaches to problem-solving can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. This embodies one of the core values the Triwizard Tournament aims to highlight. Karkaroff and Maxim, observing the exchange, couldn't shake off the feeling that it was all a performance, which irked them greatly. However, no matter how disgruntled they felt, they had to swallow their pride. The simplicity of the method meant that they could only blame their own students for not discovering the loophole. Moreover, being chosen by the Goblet of Fire meant entering into a magical contract that was irrevocable. They were well aware of this rule, rendering any complaints futile. Amidst the silence, a round of applause erupted from the Ravenclaw table. Hermione turned to see Zhang Chu and Luna leading the applause. Despite previous conflicts over Ethan, they showed remarkable solidarity at this crucial moment. Soon after, applause spread to the Gryffindor and Slytherin tables, initiated by Ginny and Astoria, who bravely showed their support for Hermione. Harry joined in as well. Padma and other key members of the Erudite Society, along with its members, also began to applaud, calling Ethan the chairman. Like a wave, the applause swelled throughout the hall, growing louder as more and more students joined in. Setting aside their differences, the young wizards acknowledged Hermione's status as a champion, cheering and shouting in support. "That's fantastic, Granger. I knew the age line wouldn't stop you. The champion of Hogwarts, the hero of Gryffindor." After the commotion subsided, Dumbledore coughed a few times, restoring order, and announced, "Okay, there will be time for celebrations later. Now that we have our 3 champions have been selected, please come according to the previous arrangements." Before Dumbledore could finish his sentence, the Goblet of Fire beside him stirred once more. Flames leapt up, reaching half a meter into the air, and a piece of parchment with singed edges slowly descended from above. Almost instinctively, Dumbledore extended a slender hand and caught the parchment. Holding it at arm's length, he scrutinized the name inscribed upon it. A prolonged silence enveloped the room as Dumbledore continued to gaze at the note in his hand. The entire auditorium was fixated on Dumbledore, waiting with bated breath. Then, clearing his throat, Dumbledore read aloud, "Harry Potter." Chapter 312. After Dumbledore announced his name, the auditorium fell into a stunned silence, even more profound than when Hermione was elected. The absence of applause was noticeable, replaced by a buzzing that filled the room, reminiscent of countless agitated bees. Harry, turning to Ron, found disappointment in his friend's eyes. Around him, the Gryffindor students were gaping in disbelief. "I didn't put my name in," Harry stated, his voice blank with confusion. "You know I wouldn't." Their blank stares continued until Dumbledore beckoned him into the next room. Upon entering, Harry noticed the portrait's inhabitants turning their gaze towards him. A wrinkled witch hastily moved from her frame into another, where a wizard with a walrus beard resided. She began whispering in his ear. Inside, Hermione Granger, Victor Krum, and Fleur Delacour were gathered around the fire, their silhouettes casting a striking image against the flames. Krum, leaning on the mantelpiece, was conversing with the others, occasionally stealing glances at Hermione. Hermione, seated by the stove, was engrossed in a handwritten book, much like she would be in the common room. Fleur, upon noticing Harry, turned her head, her silver hair shimmering, and asked if they were being summoned back to the Great Hall, mistaking Harry's presence for that of a messenger. Hermione, seeing Harry, expressed surprise, but greeted him with a smile, a gesture that seemed to ground Harry, bringing a slight smile to his face. Ludo Bagman's entrance, marked by hurried footsteps, changed the atmosphere. Grabbing Harry's arm, he pulled him forward, exclaiming, "How bizarre!" in a low murmur before announcing to the others, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce, incredibly, the 4th champion of the Triwizard Tournament." Hermione's eyes widened in disbelief, while Victor Krum scrutinized Harry with a mix of gloom and arrogance. Fleur, misunderstanding the situation as a joke, laughed, prompting Bagman to clarify, No, absolutely not. Harry Potter's name just came out of the Goblet of Fire." The room's door opened again, admitting Dumbledore, Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, Old Barty Crouch, Nymphadora Tonks, and Ethan Green, bringing together all the key figures of the Triwizard Tournament. Dumbledore's spell silenced the auditorium's buzz, allowing Madame Maxime to demand an explanation, her imposing stature nearly reaching the chandelier, her voice filled with urgency. "I want to know as well, Dumbledore," Karkaroff added, his cold smile and icy blue eyes conveying his skepticism about the possibility of an additional contestant despite the age restriction. Harry, increasingly agitated, insisted, I didn't. He looked to his friends for support. Hermione, you know I was with you all evening, and Ron and the other Gryffindors can vouch that I haven't been anywhere near the goblet today. Hermione confirmed. Harry's right. He was in the Gryffindor common room after yesterday's banquet. That's enough. Stop explaining. Who knows if you're colluding? Karkaroff interjected, his accusation hinting at deceit. Who knows if you told your classmates about your cheating tricks? Ahem. Finally, Ethan's voice sounded, interrupting Karkaroff's words. Mr. Karkaroff, as the headmaster of Durmstrang, you seem to misunderstand the mechanism of the Goblet of Fire. He scanned the room, capturing everyone's attention. Ethan continued. Each school is allocated one slot. Regardless of the number of candidates' names submitted from the same school, the Goblet of Fire will only select the strongest one. Even if Harry did submit his name using Hermione's method, the most he could do is replace Hermione as Hogwarts champion, not become an additional one, though I doubt Harry's strength is sufficient for even that. Ethan's blunt assessment made Harry feel a bit embarrassed, but Ethan seemed indifferent to his feelings and proceeded with his analysis. In other words, if a fourth name appears, it indicates that, according to the Goblet of Fire, a fourth school has Joe in this Triwizard tournament. Ethan speculated. When the Triwizard tournament was initially established, I believe the intention wasn't to limit it to just the 3 schools indefinitely. The creators of the Goblet of Fire likely considered the possibility of adding new competing schools in the future. The 3 headmasters exchanged glances before Dumbledore finally nodded in agreement. You are correct, Mr. Green. The Goblet of Fire is indeed capable of accommodating additional schools. Now that's more like it, Ethan smiled. If you examine the Goblet of Fire closely, you'll find that Harry Potter's name is not linked to any of the 3 existing schools. Mrs. Maxim, upon inspecting the Goblet of Fire, looked surprised. You're right, Harry has been assigned to a blank school, one that isn't among the 3 known schools. Ethan then presented his final analysis. The control over the Goblet of Fire has always been with you 3 headmasters. While Harry might manage to add his name, he couldn't possibly add a new school to the Goblet of Fire. To achieve that, one of you 3 must have acted in secret, or a mastermind would need to cast a powerful confusion curse on the Goblet of Fire. His analysis was logical and well-founded, leaving the other headmasters no choice but to accept it. Dumbledore nodded at Ethan, then turned to the others. Mr. Crouch, Mr. Bagman, as objective referees, what are your thoughts on this matter? We must adhere to the tournament's charter, which clearly states that anyone whose name emerges from the Goblet of Fire is obliged to participate in the competition, Crouch stated firmly, his face partially obscured, giving him a skeletal appearance. Ah, Barty knows the rules by heart, Bagman said, smiling. Ethan felt a twinge of suspicion towards Bagman's cheerfulness. He suspected Bagman was hoping to profit from betting on Harry, banking on his reputation as the boy who lived. However, with Ethan and Hermione present, Bagman's plans were likely doomed to fail. My views align with theirs, Dumbledore finally stated. Someone has undoubtedly manipulated the situation to force Harry into the competition. Ethan couldn't help but admire Dumbledore's ability to appear completely innocent despite knowing the orchestrator behind the scenes. I insist that my students be allowed to submit their names again, Karkaroff demanded, his previously smooth demeanor replaced by a grim expression. We must reactivate the Goblet of Fire and continue until each school has 2 champions. That's the only fair solution, Dumbledore. How this situation arose is unclear. Dumbledore addressed everyone in the room. But allowing Harry to compete does not give Hogwarts any advantage, as he clearly lacks the capability to win the championship. I suspect someone is using this as an opportunity to harm Harry, and that is our primary concern. Ah, but Dumbledore, my dear Miss Maxim, if you have another solution, I am all ears. Dumbledore waited, but Madame Maxime did not speak. She just stared angrily. Please allow me to chime in. Maybe I have a solution. It was Ethan again, offering a plan at a critical moment. Everyone turned their attention to the youngest organizer. Although the Goblet of Fire stipulates that everyone whose name comes out must participate in the competition, there is no rule stating that those who have not made a contract with the Goblet of Fire cannot participate. Ethan explained, sparking thought among those present. Then we can bypass this rule, allowing the other two schools to select an additional player to participate. The referees can score the 2 extra players as well. After modifying the competition, the inclusion of more participants will only make it more exciting. We can also introduce cooperative elements to the competition, ensuring this True Wizard tournament will be unforgettable. Upon hearing Ethan's proposal, nods of agreement filled the room. Furthermore, I believe we wizards should not be constrained by a magical vessel created by a wizard. If there are concerns, we can sign additional contracts tailored to the special circumstances of this competition. This way, everyone can compete fairly for the championship. After Ethan finished, he calmly faced the 3 school principals in the room. That's a good idea, Mr. Crouch. What do you think? Karkaroff was the first to express his agreement, recognizing it as a beneficial opportunity. Given the situation, Hogwarts had to accept Harry, despite him not being the strongest contender, while he could choose someone nearly as strong as Crumb. Ms. Maxim's eyes sparkled with agreement. Since you all have no objections, let's proceed with this plan, Mr. Crouch said, squinting at Ethan and endorsing the suggestion. Indeed, making you the organizer was the right decision, Dumbledore remarked, looking at Ethan with admiration. Both Karkaroff and Miss Maxim were eager to return and decide which young wizards to choose. Bagman, thrilled with the game's new direction, left Hogwarts with Crouch and Tonks. Before departing, Tonks couldn't resist giving Ethan a deep hug. Ethan Green, this young man, like his sister Gianna, is assertive and likes to take charge, complicating the path to victory, Crouch muttered to himself on the way back to the Ministry of Magic, his face grim. He had been facing resistance within the ministry, and his orders were not being executed as smoothly as before. Ethan's actions today reminded him of his struggles and the group working against him. Jaina Proudmoore seemed to be a constant thorn in his side. Despite his current status and power, dealing with these issues was draining. Hearing Crouch's complaints, Tonks couldn't stay silent any longer and defended Ethan. He's not the person you describe. Ethan is not only a genius wizard, but also very clever. He easily solves problems that stump everyone else, ensuring the Tri-Wizard tournament's success. Girl, you have no place to speak here, Crouch roared at her, enraged. Tonks wanted to respond but restrained herself, choosing to remain calm. Jaina's training had indeed made her more composed. Crouch, your arrogance won't last much longer. When the time comes, Ethan, whom you despise, will make you regret it, she thought to herself, confident in her brother's abilities. Chapter 313. After the Ministry of Magic officials departed, the meeting concluded. Madame Maxime, with a comforting arm around Fleur's shoulders, led her swiftly out of the room. Ethan could overhear their rapid discussion in French as they made their way toward the auditorium. Karkaroff exchanged brief greetings with Crumb before they both departed in silence. Ethan bid farewell to Hermione and Harry, then made his way back to the Ravenclaw common room. Upon entering, he was taken aback by the numerous pairs of eyes that turned to him, filled with curiosity and concern. Ethan, what happened with Harry? Did Harry become a champion? Why did Beauxbatons and Durmstrang bring over more people? As the organizer, Ethan was bombarded with questions from the younger wizards seeking information. The barrage of inquiries left him slightly overwhelmed, but he managed to share everything he knew before he could finally take a moment to rest. Meanwhile, Hermione and Harry received a hero's welcome upon returning to the Gryffindor common room. Being champions from Gryffindor, the younger house members saw this as a triumph for their house. At least we completely outshone Hufflepuff and those annoying Slytherins, they exclaimed, praising Hermione and disregarding Cedric Diggory with a nickname. Ravenclaw was not mentioned, despite the fact that Ethan, a Ravenclaw, played a crucial role as the organizer, setting challenges and rewarding the champions. His status was acknowledged as being of a higher caliber. Hermione, in particular, was overwhelmed by the attention. Previously, she had faced indifference from her peers, but now eyes filled with admiration were upon her, and members of the erudite society like Ginny wore their pride openly. Hermione, who had always been indifferent to social accolades, found herself adapting quickly to the adulation, recalling how Ethan handled similar situations with humility and grace. She thanked everyone, even those she had conflicts with, realizing the shift in their attitudes towards her was solely because she was now a champion. This realization made Hermione reflect on Ethan's insights about power. She understood that the world couldn't be changed with just reasons alone. The plight of house elves, a cause she had passionately advocated for with SBW, seemed trivial in comparison to the broader issues of wizarding arrogance and inequality. Hermione recognized that to effect real change, she needed a platform that winning the Tri-Wizard tournament could provide. Harry, on the other hand, found the attention far less enjoyable. He had always envied Ethan's popularity at Hogwarts, but never wanted it under these circumstances. Questions about how he entered the Tri-Wizard tournament plagued him, and his repeated denials fell on deaf ears. The lack of empathy and the pressure of expectations weighed heavily on him, especially when he sought solace with Ron, only to be met with skepticism and doubt. This chapter in their lives at Hogwarts marked a turning point, highlighting the complexities of fame, the burden of expectations, and the realization that true change requires more than just good intentions. The situation was both strange and familiar to Ethan. It was familiar because when Ron talked about Ethan, his expression was exactly the same as it was now. Yet, it was unfamiliar because this time, Ron's expression was directed at him. Hermione found a loophole in the Goblet of Fire and managed to get someone to take out the goblet before she successfully put the name in. "What about you, Harry? Did you use an invisibility cloak?" Ron asked, his tone stiff. When he offered his explanation again, the other party simply ignored it and speculated on his own. "If it doesn't work during the day, what about at night when you're sleeping? Hermione went there at noon when no one was around. Did you go with her?" "You all have ways to become champions. I'm just a bit behind. I can't think of a way." "I don't blame you, really, but you should at least tell me so I can prepare a celebration and for you in advance." Eventually, Ron's frustration turned into anger towards Harry. "I thought we were best friends, and yet each of you found a way to break through, but you've always hidden it from me, leaving me out. You know I also want to be a champion." Disappointed, Harry left the dormitory and found a secluded corner to sit in, holding his head in his hands. He had hoped that at least a few people would believe him, especially Ron. "Harry, what are you doing squatting here?" a surprised female voice asked. "Hermione." Harry looked up at the girl standing before him, his heart filled with mixed emotions. It felt like ages since they last studied together and had a serious conversation. "Why isn't Ron with you?" Hermione inquired, glancing around. "Ron. He asked me how I managed to put my name into the Goblet of Fire," Harry murmured, his voice tinged with helplessness. Understanding Ron's character, Hermione quickly grasped the situation. She brushed her long, unkempt hair back and said bluntly, "Harry, he's just jealous." Hermione's tone was calm, as if she were merely stating a fact, and Harry knew her insights were always accurate. She patiently explained, "At home, he's the least noticed. In Gryffindor, you're always the center of attention, while he's often overlooked." She paused, observing Harry's reaction. He simply stared back, his face devoid of anger, prompting Hermione to continue. "Compared to you, he feels invisible. Compared to me, he feels inadequate. Compared to Ethan." A subtle smile crossed her lips. "Humph." Though she didn't say it outright, Harry nodded in agreement, understanding Hermione's analysis. "I, Ethan, have grown distant from him, and while I'm barely considered a friend, you're his best friend, and your fame often leaves him in the shadows. The three of us used to be close friends, but now you and I have become champions, and he's been left out. He probably couldn't bear it anymore." Hermione's voice carried a hint of helplessness. "You mean he said that on purpose?" Harry asked, his voice filled with disappointment and pain, as if deeply wounded by his friend's betrayal. Hermione gently patted his shoulder, offering silent comfort. She knew Harry needed not words, but someone to believe in and support him. "Hermione, do you believe me?" Harry suddenly looked up at her, his gaze firm. "Of course, I know you didn't sign up," Hermione replied without hesitation. She almost added, "You don't have that ability yet," but stopped herself, knowing such words could further hurt Harry's already wounded heart. Taking Hermione's response to heart, Harry's eyes moistened with gratitude. At that moment, he felt truly believed in and supported. Ethan finally felt the firm support from his good friend. At that moment, Ginny emerged from around the corner. Upon hearing her, Hermione's face flushed with a hint of embarrassment as she discussed her brother in front of Ethan. She offered Ginny an awkward smile, but Ginny seemed unfazed. "Harry, I believe in you too," Ginny said in a gentle voice. "You know, Ron can be like this sometimes. He can get jealous, but he's not a bad person." She continued, "If you're patient with him and avoid escalating the conflict, he'll come around on his own, just like he always does." Despite her words, Ginny couldn't help but recall the incident from her first year at school. To save Ron, Ethan had even invoked the Guardian of Love spell on his behalf. She never wanted Ron to lose his best friend, a sentiment that was evident in her earnest expression and sincere tone. Chapter 314. Since his fallout with Ron, Harry has felt increasingly isolated. Hermione Granger has become his sole confidant. Both being champions of Hogwarts, they shared a mutual understanding that brought them closer, a development that Hermione found somewhat awkward. A year prior, she would have been thrilled to collaborate with Harry and Ron. However, after a year of distance, her perspective shifted dramatically. No longer just the know-it-all of Gryffindor or a mere member of the Savior Trio, Hermione had evolved. She became the president of the Erudite Society and was recognized as a genius among her peers, forming her own circle of friends. She grew close to Ethan, bonded with Jiang Chu and Luna, and her relationship with Ginny improved significantly. This new circle of friends allowed Hermione to experience genuine female camaraderie. The only downside was the inevitable arguments whenever a certain topic was broached. Adapting to life without Harry and Ron had become the new norm for Hermione. Now, finding herself back in their company felt awkward. As they made their way to the Great Hall for breakfast, they were greeted by fellow students, especially the younger Gryffindors, who idolized them as heroes. A senior Gryffindor student encouraged them to showcase Hogwarts' superiority to the visiting schools, Beauxbaton and Durmstrang. Hermione, now more adept at social interactions thanks to her experience with the Erudite Society, responded with grace and a smile. Harry, on the other hand, felt out of his element, envious of Hermione's ease, and reflecting on how much she had changed. Upon entering the Great Hall, Harry realized the reception was not as warm as he had hoped. While Hermione was generally well received, thanks to her cleverness and the support from the Erudite Society, Harry faced skepticism. Some students, particularly from Slytherin, speculated that he had coerced Hermione into helping him cheat to become a champion. These whispers made Harry uncomfortable. As they neared the Ravenclaw table, they were suddenly surrounded by a diverse group of students from various houses, including Luna from Ravenclaw, Ginny from Gryffindor, the Padma sisters, Ethan's roommates Steve and Kevin, and even a few from Slytherin. The group was led by Jiang Chu, who approached with a bright smile. Harry hoped for a moment of support, but Jiang Chu's attention was solely on Hermione. "Hi, Hermione, we have something great to show you," Jiang Chu exclaimed, proudly displaying a large, intricately crafted badge pinned to her uniform. The badge, adorned with the Erudite Society's emblem and a cartoon portrait of Hermione wielding her wand elegantly, symbolized her achievements and status within the society. "There are other variations of this badge," Jiang Chu added, revealing the depth of their admiration for Hermione. This moment underscored the profound changes in their relationships and the shifting dynamics within their circle of friends. Harry, witnessing this exchange, felt a mix of emotions, realizing the complexity of their evolving friendships. Ethan waved his wand at the badge, and Hermione's portrait on the badge immediately transformed into a row of red characters. Support Hermione Granger. The most striking aspect was that this badge wasn't exclusive to Jiang Chu alone. Almost everyone behind her sported the same badge on their chests. Thank you for your support," Hermione managed to say, her cheeks flushing. It was unclear whether the blush was due to the red letters on the badges or her overwhelming emotions. "See? Not bad, right? Ethan handed these out early in the morning, and everyone in the Boshi Society is wearing one." Jiang Chu revealed the person behind the gesture. Hermione's gaze shifted towards the long Ravenclaw table where Ethan sat, offering her a smile. Her eyes welled up with tears, touched by the warm reception. Harry, witnessing this, couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. Clum and Fleur, both champions like him, received similar adoration from students across his bay, houses at Hogwarts. Yet, Harry felt overlooked, longing for the same recognition and support. His wish was granted in an unexpected manner. Heading to his dreaded potions class, Harry encountered Slytherin students sporting badges that bore his name, albeit with a less flattering message. The badges glowed green, proclaiming "Potter stinks." Malfoy's taunting offer to distribute more badges only fueled Harry's anger. Soon, Ethan caught wind of a skirmish between Harry and Malfoy. Without Hermione and Ron's support, Harry faced a humiliating defeat. To make matters worse, Snape penalized Harry by deducting 50 points and let Malfoy off with a mere day of confinement. This series of events dealt a heavy blow to Harry's spirits. With Ron and Hermione preoccupied and Ethan equally bewildered, Harry sought solace in Hagrid's company. Upon entering Hagrid's hut, Harry was greeted by a peculiar mix of scents: malt liquor, latex gummy candy, cologne, and machine oil, the latter likely from Hagrid's motorcycle. The overwhelming odors made Harry recoil, understanding why Ethan preferred the chilly breeze by the window. "Are you meeting someone?" Harry inquired, puzzled by Hagrid's unusual effort in grooming. "It's not exactly a meeting. I just thought it was time to pay more attention to my appearance," Hagrid confessed, his cheeks reddening. He then turned to Ethan, seeking validation. "You know her. Do you think she'll like how I look?" "Who are you talking about?" Harry asked, even more bewildered. "Of course, it's Madame Maxime." Ethan provided the answer everyone expected. "Hagrid is seeking advice on courtship." Hagrid, now embarrassed by Harry's realization, fumbled with his large hands and explained in a hushed tone, "I was utterly captivated by her from our first meeting. Her broad shoulders. Her legs are so thick." Harry thought Hagrid's choice of adjectives was odd. Yet upon reflection, Mrs. Maxime's towering stature seemed quite compatible with Hagrid. Harry then realized he was the odd one out in this conversation with Hagrid, as he had never been able to express his feelings to the only girl he had ever liked, Zhang Chu. His crush was unrequited, and he struggled to even hold a conversation with her. Thus, he found himself listening to Ethan's discourse, which ranged from evolutionary psychology to 36 strategies for love to men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Both Hagrid and Harry were momentarily taken aback by the breadth of Ethan's knowledge. Hagrid looked at Ethan with eyes full of admiration. Harry even lamented his own lack of success in love. Unfortunately, Ethan omitted two crucial secrets: the importance of being handsome and understanding what women think. Without mastering these, all other advice was futile. Following Ethan's advice without these insights would lead to certain failure. Oblivious to the mischief he had caused, Ethan returned to the castle, pleased with himself for having helped his friends. Meanwhile, Harry went back to the lounge, his mind cluttered with advice that, in the end, he found no use for. He was still without someone to share his thoughts with. Chapter 315. The next morning at breakfast, Ethan received a notice that he was required to participate in the ritual of testing the wand. Dumbledore had arranged for a smaller classroom to be used for the wand testing, with most of the desks pushed to the back, leaving a large open space in the center. At the front of the classroom, 3 desks were lined up in front of the blackboard, covered with a long piece of velvet. Behind the velvet-covered desk, 6 chairs were arranged, one of which was occupied by Ludo Bagman. "Oh, it turns out it's not the Warriors. Hello, Ethan, you're the first to arrive." Ludo Bagman greeted him with his usual enthusiasm. He stepped forward and shook Ethan's hand. "This is your first time participating. Perhaps you're not aware that the purpose of gathering everyone here is to assist the Warriors by testing their wands. It's just a ceremony." "Detection wand?" Ethan asked, slightly confused. "Just to check if your wands are functioning properly. It's a routine procedure during the Triwizard Tournament," Bagman explained, leaning in to whisper. "As you know, the wand is the most crucial tool for the Warriors in the upcoming tasks. We must ensure that no one has tampered with them." Of course, the expert enlisted to test the wands was Ollivander, the venerable wand-maker from Diagon Alley. "He's one of our own at Hogwarts, so you understand, right?" Soon, Professor Karkaroff, Miss Maxime, and Mr. Crouch arrived in the small classroom and took their seats behind the long velvet table, guided by Bagman. The door creaked open, and a blonde witch in red robes, adorned with jewel-encrusted glasses, made her entrance. She raised a thick eyebrow upon seeing Ethan. It was Rita Skeeter, an old acquaintance of Ethan's. Hermione slipped in behind her and stood next to Ethan. The young wizards from Durmstrang and Beauxbatons entered behind Dumbledore, with Harry walking in last. "This is Estella Dumont," Fleur introduced, taking the initiative. "She's from the Dumont family. Her brother David is a renowned genius at Beauxbatons. Of course, he's not as exceptional as you." Ethan glanced at the other champions, noting, Beauxbatons certainly has its peculiarities, selecting 2 female champions consecutively. He thought to himself that while David seemed competent, he was no match for Fleur. Durmstrang's other champion, Polyakov, a hook-nosed boy with a goatee, seemed to shadow Karkaroff, acting as his assistant in managing the students. "Now, warriors, let the most charming blonde, Rita Skeeter, introduce you to the wider world. At the Ministry of Magic's request, we will take photos and conduct interviews with you, the unprecedented 6 champions. After the group photos, please stay for individual interviews," Rita announced, flipping her golden hair. "They made the right choice selecting me. My fearless quill has unveiled many pretenders." "Well, I must say, your article on the International Confederation of Wizards was quite remarkable," Dumbledore interjected, his eyes twinkling. "I particularly enjoyed your portrayal of me as an old madman." Rita Skeeter, unfazed, replied, "I just wanted to highlight that some of your views might be a bit outdated, Dumbledore. There are many wizards out there." "I would love to hear your candid thoughts, Rita," Dumbledore said, smiling slightly and bowing politely, "but I'm afraid that discussion will have to wait. For now, let's focus on photographing the champions." The photographer Rita had brought along eagerly, prepared for the group photo. Okay, let's start with a group photo," Rita said, her gaze landing on Ethan. "Perhaps we can take some solo photos later." Ethan rolled his eyes at her. "Don't even think about taking photos of me this time, Rita. I'm not a participant this time. I'm an organizer and referee." "That's truly a shame," Rita sighed dramatically. Just as she was about to usher the champions into position, Ethan stopped her. "Miss Skeeter, this isn't the first time we've collaborated. The conditions this time. I have very MPL requests. I don't want to see any scandal between Hermione and Fleur. As for the rest, it's up to you," Ethan Green stated. "Of course, Mr. Green, I'll be happy to oblige you," was the response. After a considerable wait, once all the champions had been interviewed individually, they were escorted back to the long velvet table. "Please allow me to introduce Mr. Ollivander," Dumbledore announced, taking his seat at the referee's bench. He addressed the champions. "He will inspect your wands to ensure they are in optimal condition before the tournament begins. Miss Delacour, would you come first, please?" Mr. Ollivander requested, moving to the center of the room. Fleur Delacour gracefully approached Mr. Ollivander and handed him her wand. He twirled it between his fingers like a conductor with a baton, and the wand emitted a shower of pink and gold sparks. Bringing the wand closer for inspection, he murmured, "Not bad, 9.5 inches. Very strong, made of maple, contains... Oh my." "It contains a Vila hair," Fleur interjected. "It's from my grandmother." "That's correct," Mr. Ollivander acknowledged. "Indeed, I've never personally used Vila hair in wand-making. I find wands with Vila hair to be overly sensitive and capricious, but to each their own, if it suits you." He continued to examine the wand for any signs of damage. Then, with a whisper of, "Orchids are blooming," a bouquet of flowers materialized at the wand's tip. Following Fleur, Estella, Krum, and Polyakov presented their wands for inspection. Even though some were not crafted by him, Mr. Ollivander could identify the materials and lengths upon handling them, and he pointed out minor imperfections. Harry's wand, in particular, received high praise, being described as one of his proudest creations. However, when Hermione's wand was presented, Mr. Ollivander was astounded. "An all-metal wand, my goodness, I've never encountered such craftsmanship." He carefully examined the wand, treating it as a precious find. "It's entirely made of fairy silver, 11 inches long, and the core, it's something I've never encountered, but it must be immensely powerful. The magical patterns seem to enhance magic and conductivity." The core of Hermione's metal wand, made from Iwu feathers, was indeed a novelty to Ollivander. He scrutinized the wand repeatedly, taking several minutes before he could part with it and address Hermione. "Miss Granger, I recall you purchasing your first wand from me, a 10 3/4 inches vine wood wand with a dragon heartstring core," Hermione shared openly. "That wand was very helpful to me. As for this one, it was a gift from Ethan." "That's remarkable. You are truly a master wand maker," Ollivander said, looking at Ethan with admiration, eager to discuss wand-making techniques with him. This unexpected title made Ethan sweat as he remembered the secrets he had arranged behind the scenes. It seemed like a form of retribution after so many years. Everyone, including Dumbledore, looked at Ethan in surprise. The Ollivander family, renowned for their wand-making, had never produced a metal wand. From Ollivander's description, it was clear that this metal wand was not merely for show, but was indeed powerful and functional. Homemade magic, magical animagus transformations, potions, alchemy, Quidditch, and now wand-making. What couldn't Ethan do? Karkaroff and Maxim felt increasingly justified in their decision to exclude Ethan from the tournament participants. "If you have votes, please consider giving them to me, the author. This is very important to me." Chapter 316. After the inspection. After inspecting the wand, Ollivander reluctantly handed the metal wand back to Hermione. However, Karkaroff suddenly stood up, challenging its use. "Wait, Mr. Ollivander, you mentioned that this metal wand is more powerful than a standard wand. Doesn't that give an unfair advantage to certain competitors? I believe we should prohibit its use in the competition." Dumbledore, frowning and clearly displeased, responded, "The Triwizard Tournament rules do not specify that competitors cannot use enhanced wands, do they, Karkaroff?" Karkaroff, undeterred, argued, "But the Charter does prohibit the use of magical items that exceed certain specifications. In my view, Miss Granger's wand falls into this category." Upon learning that Ethan Green had crafted the wand, Karkaroff sensed a problem. Ethan seemed to have a close relationship with Hermione Granger, Hogwarts champion. This was concerning. To prevent Ethan from participating, they had tolerated his involvement as an organizer and judge, a decision already biased towards Hogwarts. They had stopped Ethan, but inadvertently allowed his influence to extend to the champions. What if Ethan was allowed to assist Hermione without restraint? Madame Maxime was inclined to agree with Karkaroff, but before she could express her support, Ethan countered sharply. "A wand is merely a tool for channeling a wizard's power. Its effectiveness ultimately depends on the wizard's own abilities. Should we disable it simply because it's slightly more powerful than usual?" He then turned his gaze to Karkaroff and Krum, his tone growing stern. "If Hermione's wand is to be banned, then I must argue that using broomsticks like the Firebolt in competitions also disrupts the balance. If we're to be fair, then everyone should use cornflower brooms in the game." Cornflower, known for its safety and reliability, also features a built-in anti-theft buzzer. However, in terms of speed, comparing the Firebolt to a cornflower is like comparing a Formula One race car to a leisurely bicycle ride. Ethan then silently apologized to Madame Maxime and Fleur, thinking, "Furthermore, Miss Fleur's Vila heritage gives her an advantage that exceeds the norm. I might suggest she cover her face during the competition to prevent her Vila charm from influencing other competitors and the judges' scores." Karkaroff was left speechless by Ethan's retort. Krum's exceptional flying skills, honed as a Quidditch star, were one of his significant advantages. With the competition's events still unannounced, it was unclear if his skills would be relevant. However, being restricted to a cornflower would nullify his talents. Madame Maxime, too, remained silent, recognizing that Fleur's Vila abilities were an invaluable asset to Beauxbatons. Banning them would be a considerable loss. As the debate threatened to escalate, Ollivander intervened. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may offer a perspective. Miss Granger's wand was crafted at least 6 months ago, not specifically for this tournament. It doesn't seem to warrant concern. Moreover, a wand that complements a wizard's strength is crucial. Forcing Miss Granger to switch wands now would be exceedingly unfair." Ethan quickly added, "Exactly. If Hermione's wand is to be banned, then I propose all competitors relinquish their personal wands and use standard-issue wands provided by the tournament. How does that sound?" This argument effectively silenced Karkaroff and Madame Maxime, leaving them no choice but to concede that Hermione could use her powerful wand in the tournament. However, Karkaroff stipulated, "In that case, let's consider the matter of the wand settled. But you must promise not to provide Miss Granger with any other magical items that could unfairly influence the competition." "Certainly," Ethan agreed. Ethan nodded. He had never considered using magical items to gain an unfair advantage over Hermione. After all, if that were the case, Gwen and Oriana would also be considered magical items. Ethan was determined to help Hermione in a legitimate way. "Okay, now that the champions' wands have been tested, what are we waiting for? Come over and take photos quickly." Bagman, noticing the tension on the field, quickly intervened to lighten the mood. Under Bagman's enthusiastic encouragement, Karkaroff and Maxim, albeit reluctantly, set aside their grievances. Along with Dumbledore, they joined the champions for a group photo. After the wand inspection ceremony concluded, Ethan promptly gathered Hermione and Harry and led them outside the castle. "Ethan, what's happening?" Hermione asked, surprised. "I still need to prepare for the next challenge. You know, the Triwizard Tournament has more history than anything else. I need to strategize." Harry shared her concerns. He was determined to excel in the competition, especially with the Potter Stinks badges aggravating him. "There's no need," Ethan reassured them, shaking his head. "With me here, you don't need to worry. The equipment for the first task arrived today, and that's why I wanted you to see it." Ethan's tone was casual, as if the matter was as simple as a daily routine. "Ethan, isn't this cheating?" Hermione couldn't help but question. The principled young witch was opposed to using such methods to win. Ethan shook his head in response. "Have you forgotten what I told you? Cheating is a tradition in the Triwizard Tournament. As long as you're not caught, it doesn't count. Even if I don't inform them, the heads of the other schools will soon tell their champions. So don't overthink it. You're just finding out a few days before them." Ethan's words shattered Hermione's perspective. She was shocked to learn that even Dumbledore would endorse such tactics. Ethan sighed at her reaction. He realized Hermione had yet to understand the true nature of society. The essence of what's often called a Western contract society isn't just about doing anything that isn't explicitly forbidden by law, but rather about not getting caught. This principle applies to everything from the tradition of doping in sports to the so-called ethical political donations, and even extends to human experimentation and sterilization targeting vulnerable groups. Corruption, in a moral society, is acknowledged as wrong and conducted in secrecy. However, in what's deemed a civilized society, such actions are often conducted openly, without any pretense. As long as there's no evidence of a quid pro quo, political donations aren't considered bribes. This was why Ethan admired Hermione. Despite her naivety, she was genuinely kind-hearted. Leading a disillusioned Harry and Hermione, Ethan made his way to the Forbidden Forest. Suddenly, Hermione heard a familiar sound, a few wizards shouting, followed by a deafening roar. She recognized it from the World Cup. As they moved past a thick bush, they were met with an astonishing sight, a fire dragon. Chapter 317. 3 ferocious adult dragons, resembling fire dragons, were confined within a field bordered by thick wooden boards. They stood on their hind legs, roaring and snorting, as balls of flame burst from their open mouths, shooting into the air. They appeared to be attempting to escape the enclosure, but several long vines emerged from the ground, binding their feet and wings securely. A distressed horsewoman stood nearby, her hands clasped over her chest, observing the dragons. Surrounding them, at least 10 wizards took turns casting spells, attempting to soothe the agitated creatures. "What's going on, Charlie?" Ethan approached the person overseeing the situation to inquire. The individual in question was Charlie Weasley, the eldest brother of the Weasley family, who worked at a dragon farm in Romania. This dragon farm was a partner of the Triwizard Tournament, and Charlie was responsible for this particular task. Upon seeing Ethan, Charlie greeted him with a friendly nod and a half-joking remark. "Hello, Ethan. Are you here for an inspection?" "And Harry and Hermione, what are they doing here?" "They're both champions from Hogwarts," Ethan replied with a smile. "I brought them here to see what they'll be facing, so they can mentally prepare themselves and perhaps write their wills in advance." Harry visibly cringed at Ethan's joke, while Hermione rolled her eyes. "That's it. That's it, Charlie responded, not surprised by Ethan's teasing nature. He was more taken aback by the fact that Harry and Hermione were champions. Look at you two, becoming champions. Little Ron has a knack for making friends, though I doubt he sees it that way himself. After the pleasantries, Charlie got down to business. Sorry, Ethan, as per your request, we specifically selected 3 wild and untamable fire dragons for the champions to face. But as you can see, they're proving to be a bit too much to handle. At that moment, the horsewoman approached Ethan excitedly. Ethan, you're here, she said, her rainbow-colored hair making her stand out. And Hermione, you're a Hogwarts champion too, hello. Hello, Daisy, Hermione greeted her with familiarity. Hermione knew Daisy, the centaur who often visited the tower, and the mushroom circle near the tower that led to Daisy's home. As the president of a society, Hermione sometimes sought Daisy's help in gathering materials for the society's teaching aids. So, you're here to help with the fire dragons? Hermione inquired, noticing the vines restraining the dragons. Yes, these 3 are too violent, and the wizards here are not up to the task. They're no match for you, Daisy complained, looking at Ethan. When can you take these dragons away? Their constant roaring and the dragon breath have burned many trees, and the small animals in the Forbidden Forest are terrified. Don't worry, Daisy, Ethan assured her. The first task will start soon, and all 3 fire dragons will be taken away. They won't be here for long. Ethan, you mean we have to face a fire dragon in the first task? Harry finally realized, his voice trembling with fear. The idea of facing a fire dragon, especially when each currently required the attention of 10 adult wizards, was daunting. Hermione, however, was focused on a different issue. If there are 6 champions, why do we only have 3 dragons? Harry looked at Hermione in horror, thinking that facing a dragon alone was a terrifying prospect. He considered withdrawing from the competition if it meant facing a dragon by himself. Whoever wants to be this broken warrior can be that person, Ethan said, clarifying the situation. In fact, Ludo and Crouch Sr. also suggested adding 3 more dragons, but I rejected the idea. The 3 dragons we have can already fulfill the competition's requirements if we slightly modify the competition format. Given that each school has 2 participants this time, incorporating some elements of teamwork could make the event more thrilling. He then reassured Harry, Don't worry. Expect the champions to defeat the fire dragon. It's merely an obstacle to overcome in achieving the competition's objective. Harry's expression visibly relaxed upon hearing this. Meanwhile, the fire dragons continued their uproar. Charlie attempted to calm them by ordering his team to cast the stun curse, but it proved ineffective due to the dragon's high resistance to magic. Suddenly, a whistling wind heralded the arrival of a striking woman adorned in luxurious attire, with dragon wings unfurling behind her. She descended from the sky, and upon landing, her wings vanished. What happened? Can't you handle these creatures without me? Are you as inept as Yuichimon's transformations? Too useless, she chastised the dragon handlers upon her arrival. Her harsh words might have seemed excessive to Harry, but the trainers accepted her criticism without protest, apologizing profusely for their failure. I always feel like there are some odd individuals among the dragon tamers, Harry thought to himself. Forget it. Step aside, and I'll take care of this, the woman said dismissively, turning her attention to the fire dragons. Harry couldn't help but find her confidence amusing, doubting that a mere command would subdue the beasts. Yet, to his astonishment, the dragons immediately became docile under her scolding, tucking in their wings, bowing their heads, and lying down as if in reverence. Who is she? Harry asked Charlie, bewildered by her control over the dragons. Miss Katrana Presto, Director of the Department of Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures and the Office of Beasts. She's a renowned dragon tamer, known as the Queen of Fire Dragons, for her ability to command these creatures with her presence alone, Charlie explained, his admiration for Katrana evident. Moreover, she's recognized as the second magical animagus after Ethan, famed for her partial transformation into a fire dragon, a technique Ethan himself taught her. I see, Charlie said, his respect for Ethan growing. However, Ethan seemed troubled by Katrana's revelation. He pulled her aside, questioning, What's wrong with you? I allowed you the ability to partially transform, not to reveal it to everyone. If it can't be shared, isn't that the same as restricting its use? Katrana, or Onyxia, replied with a smile. You know I have to interact with outsiders daily at the Ministry of Magic. You don't want me to use my abilities, but how else am I to manage? Partial transformation in front of outsiders is essentially equivalent to prohibiting transformation, she said, stepping forward to hug Ethan's arm, enveloping it completely. With a coquettish tone, she added, Besides, Hogwarts doesn't allow space movement. Without my wings, commuting will be too troublesome. You wouldn't want me to get exhausted, would you? Anyway, you've already shown off your animagus magic. There's no need to hide this skill. Just consider it a convenience for me. Okay, Master? Hearing the Black Dragon Princess speak so coquettishly, Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. This female dragon was incredibly persuasive. It was no surprise that in the World of Warcraft universe, she could leverage her status as a noblewoman to control the government of the Kingdom of Stormwind for so long, even manipulating the legendary warrior Bolvar Fordragon. The contrast was stark, especially considering how she had just angrily reprimanded all the dragon trainers like a queen, and now here she was, humbly referring to Ethan as master, a term she usually avoided. Considering her request, Ethan decided to compromise. Then, do what you want, but for now, let's not expose anything more, including your dragon blood transformation. And don't let me hear about you using your colleagues as guinea pigs. No problem, heh. I knew Master was the best, she responded gleefully. Wrong. This isn't your master. This is Iwu's master. Iwu, who had originally come to play with Onyxia, couldn't hold back any longer. Flying directly to Ethan's head, Iwu declared his sovereign. After the brief altercation, Ethan decided to leave Iwu in Onyxia's care, taking Hermione and Harry back to the castle. Before departing, he reminded Hermione, Remember to go home this evening and ask if I need help. Chapter 318. When Hermione returned to the tower after dinner, she found that Ethan had been waiting for a long time. Accompanying him in the tower were Chu-Jang and Luna. So what did you ask me to do? Hermione inquired curiously. Are you going to teach me how to deal with fire dragons? No, that's not it, Ethan shook his head. But after tonight, you won't need to learn spells to deal with fire dragons. You'll be able to handle those fire dragons on your own. He then stopped beating around the bush and took out a test tube containing a bright red liquid. I've found the magical animagus ingredient that's suitable for you. It was sent from Neon 2 days ago. Magical animagus? Hermione's interest was piqued. What kind of animal's blood is this? It's Nekomata, Ethan explained. This magical creature is commonly found in the Dragon Kingdom and Neon. It resembles an ordinary cat but has 2 tails. Cats possess extraordinary agility and powerful magical power, including the ability to transform into any human they have seen. They often use this ability to move undetected through markets, invisible to ordinary people. Cats are not usually hostile towards humans, but that doesn't mean they pose no threat. Nekomata's fangs and claws carry a deadly curse, which can afflict those injured by it with illness. Legend has it that individuals killed by a Nekomata will become inferi under its control. Hearing Ethan's description, Hermione was visibly excited. She had previously heard Ethan mention that, like ordinary animagi, magical animagi must consider compatibility. It's not simply a matter of wanting to transform into any animal. However, magical animagi can be screened and tested to identify species with high compatibility, avoiding the randomness of traditional transformations and offering a higher probability of a suitable match. But why Nekomata? The thought of her animagus form being a cat-like creature reminded her of the nightmare she experienced when she was transformed into a half-human, half-cat hybrid. Even though Ethan had later reversed the transformation, leaving her with a tail and cat ears for a month, the idea of becoming a Nekomata made her wary of Ethan's intentions. Yet, the prospect of becoming a magical animagus was too enticing. Success would make her the second true magical animagus after Ethan, enhancing her ability to support Ethan and navigate the Triwizard Tournament more effectively. Really? Can I truly become a Nekomata? Hermione glanced at Ethan, suspecting a mischievous smile on his face. However, with Chu-Jang and Luna present, she refrained from mentioning her past ordeal, simply responding, Then, all right. Ethan then retrieved a crystal medicine bottle from beneath the oak tree, containing Hermione's saliva and a teaspoon of dew. The potion, having absorbed the essence of the moon, had turned red. He began preparing the transformation potion for Hermione, reminding her of the key points to remember during her first transformation. Understanding the process alleviates fear and stress, and a calm mental state can significantly improve the chances of a successful transformation. The group gathered under the oak tree, where the bright moon hung in the sky. Ethan had modified the animagus ritual, eliminating the need for stormy weather, and instead requiring a moonlit night, making the ritual far more convenient than its original form. Handing the prepared potion to Hermione, Ethan placed his hand on her shoulder and said firmly, "Don't worry. I'm here," Hermione said, looking at Ethan and nodding vigorously as she took the potion. She hesitated for a moment, then drank the potion in one gulp, wiping the remaining drops from the corner of her mouth. Suddenly, she frowned, feeling her internal organs churn as if she had swallowed several live snakes. Bending down, she recalled Ethan's instructions and began to attempt the animagus transformation, trying to harness the power of the potion. A burning sensation quickly spread from her stomach throughout her body, reaching her fingers and toes. Then she experienced a terrible melting feeling, as if her skin was bubbling like hot wax, forcing her to lie on the ground, panting. An unpredictable force enveloped her, making her sensitive and impulsive, with a newfound desire to run, play tricks, and explore the world. Hermione shook her head desperately, trying to maintain her composure in front of Ethan. She wanted to always present a good image to him. However, the new magical power was transforming her thinking. Unlike ordinary animals, becoming a magical animagus required battling not only one's wild nature, but also resisting the influence of supernatural traits. Many magical creatures are born with inherent personality traits linked to their powers. For instance, the Chimera is naturally evil and filled with dark magic, while the Quetzalcoatl is kind and capable of using positive magic. The Necomata, or cat demon, has a unique personality of its own. Just as Hermione felt overwhelmed by this power, a familiar aura filled her heart, helping her resist the external forces. This is Ethan's power. Though it was merely a sensation, Hermione instinctively recognized its source. Having spent years together, she was very familiar with this aura. "Sorry to bother you again," she thought, drawing strength from Ethan's spiritual power. She faced the Necomata's power once more, understanding that only by withstanding its influence could she truly master the magic. The mental battle was as intense as the physical pain. Hermione felt agony in her bones as her body began to shrink, as if being squeezed into a narrow suitcase. The pain in her tailbone indicated the emergence of something new, and as her figure shrank, her robe merged with her body, sprouting black and white cat fur. Struggling to adapt, Hermione attempted to move but found herself with 4 flailing cat claws instead of hands. Transitioning from bipedal to quadrupedal movement without any practice, she lost her balance and fell. This fall, however, allowed Ethan and the others to observe Hermione's magical animagus form closely. She had transformed into a large cat, 2 meters in length, with 2 80-centimeter-long tails swinging back and forth. Her fur was black and white, with shiny black covering her head and back, while her belly and muzzle were white. Her golden eyes were piercing, marking her as a striking black and white cat. Chapter 319, Hermione's Feline Predicament. Hermione had finally gotten used to walking on 4 legs and decided to test her new abilities with a tentative leap forward. To her surprise, she jumped much farther than anticipated. Quickly regaining control, she braked with her hind legs and struck an oak tree with her front paws, causing her entire body to sit down abruptly. Tilting her furry head, she seemed to ponder how she could have achieved such a feat. Unbeknownst to her, her adorable actions nearly overwhelmed Ethan, who was watching from the sidelines. When Hermione accidentally transformed into a cat lady, Ethan found great joy in petting her. Now he couldn't bear the thought of letting her fully embrace her feline form. After a moment's thought, he extended his wand, transforming a crystal bottle containing a potion into a large cardboard box, which he then moved in front of Hermione with a flick of his wand. The sight of the box immediately triggered Hermione's instincts, and she pounced into it without a second thought. Realizing what she had done, she leaped out in frustration and demolished the box with a powerful swipe of her paw. Ethan couldn't contain his laughter at the sight. Hermione's furry face displayed an expression of anger, but her feline features rendered it far from intimidating. Ethan then cast the dancing lights technique, creating a captivating display of swaying lights in front of Hermione. Her attention was instantly captured, and she couldn't resist pouncing at the lights. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan approached her from behind and began to stroke her smooth fur, eliciting a protest from Hermione. Despite her efforts to escape, Ethan's grip was firm, and his petting grew more audacious. Hermione attempted to use her innate abilities to compel Ethan to release her, but she underestimated his resilience. As a scion who regularly consumed attribute-enhancing elixirs, Ethan's willpower was formidable. Shaking off her influence, he embraced her even tighter. Zhang, noticing Ethan's enjoyment, joined in the playful torment, carefully avoiding Hermione's sharp claws as he massaged the pads of her paws. Hermione's protests only intensified, but her efforts were in vain against their relentless teasing. Just when Hermione thought she couldn't endure anymore, Luna appeared in the distance. Hermione's spirits lifted at the sight of her friend, hoping for rescue from her humiliating predicament. However, Luna's actions took an unexpected turn. Approaching with a branch adorned with small pink and white flowers, Luna held it to Hermione's nose. The scent it emitted was peculiar, not entirely unpleasant, but slightly off-putting. Overcome by the strange aroma, Hermione couldn't help but sneeze, and then she couldn't. Hermione couldn't help but stretch her head out, trying to reach the branch, and finally she even opened her mouth and ate it directly. She didn't understand why she made such a move subconsciously. Cats obviously can't eat grass. When the branches were swallowed, Hermione quickly felt that something was wrong. Her entire cat form collapsed on the ground limply, turning into a puddle of fur. She stared blankly and began to murmur, "Meow," completely forgetting about her initial plan to cancel the transformation. "Did you feed her catnip?" Ethan asked Luna with a puzzled look. The little girl seemed too mischievous. "That's right," Luna said softly, scratching Hermione's chin with her hand. "I knew she would like it when I saw her animagus form." After fully enjoying the fun of petting the cat, the group finally let go of Hermione, who looked hopeless. It took her a while to recover from the catnip's effects, and she immediately changed back to her human form, then ran to the bathroom, ashamed and angry. After a while, Hermione emerged, her hair tidied and her energy somewhat restored. Though she was covered by her robe, Ethan could tell that the girl had changed her pants. Seeing Hermione staring at him angrily, Ethan preemptively said, "Through the series of experiments just now, you can probably identify your own weaknesses. Yes, it is difficult for you to resist certain animal instincts. Whose fault do you think this is?" Hermione complained in a low voice. Ethan pretended not to hear and continued, "Therefore, during this period, you need to practice animagus transformation repeatedly to try to fight against these instincts. Otherwise, they will become your weaknesses. You don't want to be defeated by a piece of catnip when you're dueling someone, do you?" Yes, I know," Hermione nodded helplessly. Although Ethan said this to cover up his earlier mischief, Hermione had to admit that his advice was sound. "However, don't worry, I will be by your side to watch you when you are practicing animagus," Ethan thoughtfully added. "I think you just want to take this opportunity to do those things." Hermione's face turned red again, but after thinking it over, she nodded. Okay, you can come with me, but only you." As she said that, Hermione looked at Zhang and Luna, who were gloating next to her. "Don't bring them with you next time." "Hermione, you are too selfish," Zhang said aggrievedly. "Your transformation is so cute, why can't you let us touch it?" Hermione kept staring at her, refusing to compromise. There were some things she didn't want these friends to know. Zhang could only spread her hands. Okay, since you are one of Hogwarts' warriors, I will make an exception and leave you two alone for a few days. Animagus Nekomata stats: Strength 18, Agility 24, Constitution 16, Intelligence 19, Perception 16, Charisma 9 abilities. Human transformation, skin thief, iron will, cursed fangs, dodge, flexible movement, telepathy, wind step, cat demon life, cat's luck spells. Level 0, phantom voice, mage's hand, switch, magic meter. Level 2, charm humans, animal conversation, constant. Level 2, command the undead, constant. Level 3, immobilization of the dead, curse. Level 4, summon the undead, constant. Level 5, telekinesis, necromancy. Chapter 3 or 20. The first transformation into an animagus. Transforming into an animagus for the first time was indeed a very exhausting experience. Hermione was so tired that she didn't even return to Hogwarts, falling asleep directly in the tower. The next day, she and Ethan returned to the castle and went to the Great Hall for breakfast. It was then that Hermione realized she was no longer the most talked-about warrior in Hogwarts. Harry had finally received the attention he had longed for, though not in the manner he had hoped. As Harry entered the Great Hall, he noticed the complex and strange looks he received from everyone. Their gazes were filled with a mix of sympathy, pity, gloating, vigilance, and excitement. He encountered 6 different people, each offering a distinct emotion, but thankfully, the previous disgust was absent. However, Harry's relief was short-lived. Upon receiving the Daily Prophet from Hermione, who gave him a peculiar look, Harry was stunned. The front-page headline was an article by Rita Skeeter about the Six Wizard Tournament, which turned out to be more of an exposé on Harry Potter's private life than a report on the event. The article occupied a significant portion of the newspaper, with photos of the top 6 competitors. However, pages 2, 3, 5, and 7 delved into the relationships and emotional entanglements between Harry, Ron, and Victor Krum from various angles. The article revisited the shocking kiss between Ron and Krum at the World Cup, pouring metaphorical pepper water on Harry's heart and leaving him with a burning, uncomfortable sensation. Rita Skeeter's article was filled with distasteful remarks and exaggerated conclusions, suggesting that Harry had found his first love at Hogwarts in Ron Weasley, a pure blood of stunning beauty. It insinuated that Victor Krum, the famous Quidditch player, had also fallen for Ron, leading to a love triangle that supposedly motivated Harry to confront Krum in the Six Wizard Tournament. Reading the article filled Harry with anger and a sense of relief that no one knew about his use of the Guardian of Love spell on Ron. Despite this, the article significantly impacted Harry's life, causing his already precarious relationship with Ron to reach a new low. They avoided each other outside of class, and Victor Krum's attempts to clarify matters with Hermione were futile, as she was indifferent to the rumors. To Krum's dismay, the girls who once sought his autographs and sent him love letters now ignored him, replaced by an influx of letters from boys, which infuriated him. Ethan was not surprised by the turn of events, considering the nature of a British magic school. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan focused on his studies and observed the unfolding drama with a detached interest, understanding the complexities of relationships within the magical community. Ethan provided comprehensive training on Hermione's animagus transformation, teaching her how to resist her transformed nature. This included not being tempted by catnip and suppressing her natural curiosity, such as refraining from chasing her own tail. Hermione also mastered a significant amount of Necomata's innate magic, gaining abilities akin to disguise magus through the characteristics of Necomata. However, due to her aversion to controlling the undead, Hermione did not fully embrace the ability to create undead creatures. Additionally, Hermione learned the partial transformation ability. After only 2 weeks, she was not yet able to transform specific parts of her body at will like Ethan, but she did master 2 fixed transformation forms under his guidance, the Catman form and the Catgirl form. In the Catman form, Hermione's appearance is roughly human, but with many Necomata features such as soft fur, slender pupils, cat ears and nose, retractable claws, and 2 smooth, round tails. This form allows Hermione to retain most of Necomata's powers while still being able to cast spells as a wizard. The Catgirl form, on the other hand, is more human-like, with the exception of cat ears, slightly pointed nails, and 2 wagging tails. While Hermione maintains superhuman agility in this form, she cannot use most of Necomata's magic power. This form is more discreet and less conspicuous than the Catman form, making Hermione's abilities more versatile. Throughout the training process, Ethan provided rigorous guidance, noting the distinct differences between the Catman, Catgirl, and other forms, though he chose not to share the specifics with outsiders. As the time for the first task approached, excitement filled the school. Everyone was eager for the event, hoping for an exciting and challenging spectacle. The school was closed for the occasion, and students, led by their house heads, made their way to the Dragon Arena, unaware of what awaited them. During lunch in the Great Hall, Professor McGonagall approached Hermione and Harry with urgency. "Miss Granger, Mr. Potter, the champions are now heading to the arena. You must be ready to face the first task," she announced. Harry stood up, his fork clattering onto his plate, while Hermione remained composed, hugging her friends Ginny, Cho Chang, and Luna, and accepting their well wishes with a smile. With the support of the Erudite Society, they followed Professor McGonagall out of the hall. Professor McGonagall led them to a tent outside the arena, trying to reassure them along the way. "Don't be nervous," she advised. "Keep a clear head. We have wizards stationed nearby to intervene if necessary." However, Hermione sensed that Professor McGonagall was more nervous than she let on. "You'll join the other champions inside," Professor McGonagall continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Bagman is there. He will explain the procedure. Good luck." Inside the tent, they found Fleur Delacour and another champion, Estella, among others. Fleur sat on a low wooden stool in the corner, looking unusually pale and far from her usual composed self. The atmosphere was tense, with one participant looking as though she might faint at any moment. Crumb's face was shadowed with concern, and his companion paced restlessly beside him. "The Hogwarts champions have arrived. Excellent!" Ludo Bagman, the head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, greeted them with a broad smile. Come in, make yourselves comfortable, just like you're at home." Hermione nearly burst into laughter at his words. After witnessing the fire dragon, the last thing anyone would feel was a sense of homeliness. Ludo Bagman, donned in his distinctive wasp-striped suit, seemed oblivious to the irony. "Now that we're all gathered, it's time to brief you on the task ahead," he announced cheerfully, gesturing towards the tent window. Through it, the champions could see 3 fire dragons on the field. "As you can see, your challenge involves these 3 behemoths. Yes, you'll be facing not 1, but 3 dragons simultaneously." The champion's anxiety visibly increased at this revelation, prompting Ludo to quickly add, "Of course, you won't be facing them alone. Your fellow champions, both companions and competitors, will be by your side. All 6 of you will enter the arena together to confront the 3 fire dragons." He continued, "And there's more. Your objective is to retrieve the golden eggs guarded by the dragons. Each dragon is protecting 2 golden eggs. You must seize these eggs and safeguard them for 30 minutes. The more golden eggs you hold at the end of the challenge, the higher your base score will be." Hermione, seizing the moment to clarify, asked, "So the competition allows us to snatch golden eggs from each other?" "Yes, Miss Granger, that's correct. However, you are not permitted to directly harm other champions. Any such actions will result in a deduction of points," Ludo explained. Hermione nodded, understanding the strategic depth of the challenge. It was designed not only to encourage cooperation among the champions in battling the dragons, but also to incite competition for the golden eggs. This dynamic was not limited to interschool rivalry, but extended within the schools themselves, as even champions from the same institution could have differing scores. She remembered Ethan mentioning that he had significantly revamped the Triwizard Tournament. The nature of this challenge seemed to perfectly encapsulate his innovative approach. Update 5/4, additional update 65. Please support me with custom orders, flowers, monthly votes, comments, and rewards. Your votes are incredibly important to me, the author.